Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Hash Church episode 115. 115 episodes without delay, never to miss, constantly here. Although I have found out that the next episode, or not the next episode, but in 3 episodes, we are going to fall on Christmas Day. So that's kind of going to be a little bit trippy. We'll see how that goes. I'm definitely not down with missing any episodes of Hash Church, but at the same time, I do have responsibilities to my family. So we'll get that figured out. In the meantime, I'm going to invite our panelists in today. We got special guest Anndrea coming in today, Hermann. She's going to be talking about hemp, in which case is why I wore my hemp shirt today and my hemp hat and my hemp pants. I'm all hemped out today, which, I used to do a lot more often when I was a full-blown hemp activist. Let me see what we got here for our links. Send out that email to Mr. Anndrea.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Etienne. Good morning, Skunkman Sam. How are both of you doing today?
Wonderful.
Welcome, Mark Scaldone, to the room. How are you doing today? Is it working?
Hey, folks. How's everybody?
Very well. 115 episodes, beautiful day with the, I woke up today and the mountains across the way got dumped on. So they're just beautiful, white, snowy mountains glowing in the sun right outside my window right now. So very happy about that. Welcome, Anndrea. Anndrea.
Wow, the doctors are all early this morning.
Well, those doctors, they got shit to do, Etienne.
Morning, doctor.
Natasha.
Welcome, Natasha.
Morning, Natasha. Morning, Mark. Mark,
you've got the echo.
I'll get my headphones on right away. Welcome, Anndrea.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome, Anndrea.
This should be fun. I'm trying to get my headphones plugged in.
Well, I guess I might as well start off with some cannabis here, since it's all in.
All right. My headphone jack is at the back of my monitor, and it's in the most difficult place to get it into each time, but I managed to get it into. I hope the echo is gone. My headphones are on. We got 400 people in the room ready to listen to hemp. And I already mentioned it once, but yes, I am wearing a lot of hemp today. From my pants to my shirt to my hat, I'm all hemped out for you, Anndrea, because I'm excited to hear what you have to say to us today. I'm not gonna lie, I've been a little off the beaten hemp track. I've fallen off the hemp track more so. I'm stuck in the processing. I'm stuck in the high cannabinoid cannabis, but I have always had a special place in my heart for hemp. I was involved in Manitoba as a hemp activist before I was a cannabis activist. So I definitely love the work that you're doing. And I'm excited to hear about it today.
I have to say the same. As I used to work for Cultivation Hemp Company back in the mid-90s, so I was very familiar with it, but I have to say the same thing. I've fallen off because of technology and genes and all that. I had a dream when I was working for Cultivation Hemp Company that I would have to sell as many flowers as I sold in hemp, and I sold tons and tons of hemp, so I ended up going on to sell tons and tons of medical grade cannabis over the years. So it's just same plant, different dichotomy.
Absolutely.
I have a question for you. What was the first year you grew hemp?
And that is directed to me. Well, the first year that I was involved in actual cultivation was in the summer of 2001. And I had acquired an internship working with the Parkland industrial hemp growers up in the Parkland region. So that was the first time I ever got to be in a real life hemp field, not to mind hemp fields, but I was really working in the agronomic trials and in the breeding program.
Have you bred any cannabis varieties?
I personally, Yeah, I personally have not bred any, but I've had the fortunate chance to work with many plant breeders across the Canadian prairies in either some of the original line selections that were coming out of the Parklands breeding program, in addition being able to help facilitate those in variety trials happening across the Canadian prairies. I am not a registered plant breeder, but do have the fortunate chance of working with them. So here in Canada, we have a Canadian Seed Growers Association. So to actually breed industrial hemp cultivars and have them placed on the list of approved cultivars, you actually have to be a registered plant breeder in Canada.
When did you first hear of cannabis hemp?
Oh, well, I think there's got to be something about the genetic memory now that I've learned more about my own family's hemp history. One of the assignments I give to the students that I work with at Oregon State University is they are to, pardon me, they are to look into their own history and find out, do they have any hemp history? And I thought, boy, if I'm assigning this to students, I should do this my same. So I have found out that we were, in my family, had a hemp history. And then being from the state of Missouri, we had the Battle of the Hemp Bells in Lexington, Missouri. And obviously, thankfully, my girlfriend's mom left a joint behind the television, and that was my first introduction to cannabis. And then right away from there, I found out, oh my gosh, there's this whole other part of the plant. And immediately I felt wronged. And I was about 14 years old, and I still felt in myself something is wrong about this. And it became immediately now what I call my final vocabulary, the first word of my final vocabulary, just like the rest of us. Probably people don't know us unless cannabis is attached quite quickly to the name, whether it be marijuana or hemp. They're synonymous with each other. And it quickly became known that this was the way I was, even when I was 14 years old. Little did I know that I was going to be, had the fortunate chances to now be sitting here on Hash Church, and such company that's honored around the world.
Well, you definitely got in pretty early. Canada started growing hemp in 1994 with Joe Strobel and Jeff Kime out on the East Coast in Ontario. Not the East Coast, but what we call the East Coast here in Vancouver. And a year later, there was a few others. We got our license that year in Manitoba. I believe there was a group in Saskatchewan who also got a license. It was all experimental. 95, we got, 95 was our first license. Only Joe and Jeff had a license in 94 in Canada. And by 96, which is pretty incredible, and I can't believe we didn't have a giant party to celebrate this, the government changed the word experimental to commercial. And that was such a huge thing in Canada. Like, it was bigger than us getting hemp growing here, because being able to grow hemp was one thing, but if it was just for research and development, we already knew what hemp could do. We wanted to implement what hemp could do and show people what hemp could do. So pretty huge thing happening in 96 in Canada with the experimental word dropped, commercial added on, and finally money be able to be made. And 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000, 5 years later, you were there doing your thing. So that's very early on for sure. I wasn't aware that you were involved on that early on. That's awesome.
Yeah, and still back in Missouri prior to that, I was doing my own little sort of activist work and education work. And absolutely, Marcus, so many people laid the framework so that I could be here to continue that work on. And we're still seeing things change every day in the hemp industry. The way that hemp looks, for instance, we used to say, oh, you could never put your marijuana plant, or in this case, we'll say female only cannabis plant in a hemp field, and it looked like different than hemp. Well, now we know the cultivation of hemp and what it looks like has also changed as we've moved to female only cultivation of industrial hemp. So the concepts have changed, the way we've had to look and describe this plant has changed, and the functionalities that are coming out of not only hemp, but the entire cannabis plant family has changed.
Do you get a more supple plant from a female than you do from a male, fiber-wise?
Oh, well, for fiber wise, I mean, if you're harvesting for fiber only, you're really taking the males and the females down at the same time. So before the males have completely, let's say, died or for better use of words, done their business. And while the females are still there, but they haven't started concentrating on grain production and versus making that stalk really sort of more rigid. So we'll see that for fiber only production, you'll harvest beforehand, before the males have completely pollinated. And then for the Canadian grain industry, which is where we've mostly been at here in Canada since Marcus was saying that the regulations went into place in March of 1998, it's all been really focused on grain. And trust us, from what I was told from the people that started in the beginning here, was that they never thought we would be eating hemp foods before we were processing hemp fiber. And here we are in, well, let's just say we're 2017, and we still do not have full-blown fiber decortication facilities here in Canada, but we have all the mechanisms, we have the producers, we have the wherewithal to be able to do that. So it was quite, I think in the initial beginning, the concept of food, we didn't even know what hemp foods really were. So those initial founding members, the Manitoba Harvest of the world, the Hemp Oil Canada, the Nativas of the world that really got out there, the Dr. Bronners, and really pushed us to where that we fought for that legislation and we really won, opened up the door for hemp foods. And now the door is opening up for hemp fibers.
Well, you know, initially the hemp food industry was sterilized seed from China that had literally zero of the essential amino acids present, all destroyed, just sterilized into death. And we used to promote that as the magical essence of hemp. You got to check these out. Mama Indica hemp seed treats. These are amazing. We're eating hemp. We're doing good. It was like several years later, we were like, you know, I think those were dead seeds. Like, I think they were completely like barely any nutritional value at all. So it's been a long, strange, trippy road. You know, hemp, I remember the first hemp clothes I used to wear used to fall apart like every 2 weeks. They would just literally like disintegrate off my body. In fact, I think it was maybe Ecolution who was one of the first companies that started selling like nice soft pants and nice shirts and really, really cool.
That's because we had to enzyme wash them, and the reality is when we were working with these 50 to 70-year-old machines in Eastern Europe, you know, they produce slubs, which of course you still had pieces of herd in the pant or the shirt, etc. So the problem was when we started to import the early on hemp products, the initial response, because it was so expensive once we imported them because of the cost of diesel fuel from the Czech Republic and Hungary and Romania to get them to port, then to get them to export to the United States. By the time we got it here in the United States, it was a couture price as it was. And then when you have a couture product that wasn't soft, they're like, hey, what the hell? So that's when we started to work directly with the Fashion Institute of Technology. They started to show us different types of enzyme washes. They were fascinated as professors because this wasn't a new fiber, but to them it was a new fiber to access.
Right.
So it was fascinating to see the progression from the very rough early to the more refined things that we were get to. But toward the end, when we're really starting to nail it, is when Ecolution fell apart because of not having the original supply in the background originally. Anndrea, I have a question for you. Back when we were learning about hemp, such as with The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and when I was starting to deal with hemp growing, we would hear things like each female plant would produce 2 to 4 cups of seed per plant. Is that still the case to this day, since you're growing for the seeds? Or how much do you get off per female plant on average?
Well, we are getting, you know what, at the start is we're not looking at per female plant yields. We really look at yields by acreage is how we really judge that. So, you know, we are talking in it. It's all about economy of scale. I think often I get pinned as, you know, Anndrea, you're commercial, you don't support the small guy. Well, no, that's not really it. But the fact is we have to look at what kind of economy of scale that we're going to be supplying into. And if we do want this to become a commodity crop, we are going to have to focus on what that looks like on a commercial production scale, whether or not that's smaller commercial farms pulling together or large commercial farms. So for yield parameters, we are looking at, you know, really we're getting upward of 1,000 and up to 2,000 pounds clean dry weight of grain. If you look at some of the statistics that comes off of the Manitoba Agriculture,
is that per acre or hectare?
That's per acre. Yeah, that's per acre.
What variety is that? Is that Panola?
Oh, that's going to be, those are, actually the yields don't differ that much among the varieties. It's because of the varieties are grown in different regions. So you'll see varieties that will be grown in northern Manitoba or southern Manitoba versus northern Saskatchewan, and southern Saskatchewan may differ a little bit. So that's why we have such a robust breeding program. Look at the Canadian breeding program. I think we have like 7 industrial hemp breeding programs. So if you look at that in comparison to the number of acreage and breeding programs that go into canola, there's way more canola variety or canola acreage, but less breeding programs actually breeding those. So it's pretty fascinating. Of course, most of ours are all private owned breeding programs to boot. There's only one variety
What variety
that's bred with Alberta.
What variety do you think the highest yield of seed?
Those varieties, like I say, once again, it's about regions. So there's not really one variety that is a better yielder than another one, but good varieties out there for grain production are, of course, varieties like Finola. And then what you've seen in the Canadian breeding program is the varieties have been bred for short stature. So the varieties are only getting maybe 4.5 to 6 feet tall. So by the time you're done harvesting, you've only got maybe a foot or less, or maybe 2 feet straw left in the field. But varieties such as Finola, then you've got Hemp Genetics International variety. Those are all principally shorter cultivars, CFX1, 2, CRS. They also have some lines by the name of Piccolo, Kitani, and Grandi. Those are also crosses with shorter stature varieties. And those ones are all really principally grain production. Then you look at some of the varieties that are coming out of the work that Jan Slansky's doing in Alberta for fiber varieties. In addition, you can look at the Parkland Industrial Hemp Growers varieties. Those ones are a little bit taller. And then all of those companies, what's so great is all of those companies are helping facilitate the cultivation of industrial hemp in the United States, also with the programs that are going on down there. So I really, have to say a big, huge thanks to all those plant breeders that have really said, hey, look, we've worked really hard. The U.S. is on mark to join us in this hemp industry, and that we need that risk diversification so that we can become more than just a niche crop. So almost all of these varieties are now being trialed. And I saw one there in Minnesota with a variety X59. They were pulling off around 1,500 pounds clean, dry weight, same farming equipment, clean, same bin space. So this is just another crop in their crop rotation. So we're really going to need that variety discovery, just like Marcus started off the show talking about that history that happened here. We didn't have Canadian varieties in Canada. We went to our colleagues at the Bass Fiber Institute in the Ukraine, and we brought over the Zolos, the USOs, and we brought those cultivars over. We worked with Jason Finland. We brought Finola over and really stabilized those varieties here in Canada. And now, boy, since then, we have a full list of approved cultivars.
I bred the variety Finola. Jace, I gave it to Jace as a developed variety.
Well, thank you so much, because let me tell you, you've fed a lot of people since then on hemp.
Go ahead, Skunk Man.
Just for the record, I've got varieties that out yield Finola easily. Skunk number 1 gives a higher yield in the field than Finola does.
And I think you bring up, an interesting topic, and this is one of the things that Paul Stanford often talks about is, of course, we've got this arbitrary THC level. Sorry, Ernie Small, we know you were put in a closet and basically you had to come up with some sort of number. And that's how we came to this sort of arbitrary 0.3% THC. But Paul's point is, well, what if we were allowing higher THC levels, and would that increase grain yield? It's a really interesting concept to look at, because we know the grain itself is innately free of THC. It's just sort of that dusting that's on the outside, right? So it's really interesting if we would look at that. Maybe we'll get closer and closer to abolishing our arbitrary THC level, but we'll take the wins when we can win them. And we just got some wins this past week from Health Canada releasing some new regulations to free us up some. And I love all the background views that are going on right here, right now.
From
Yeah,
well, you know,
from that
if they would
1,000
just
pound from that
abolish
1,000.
all the regulations, things would go along much nicer. We don't really need to have this plant regulated. It's not the plant that needs the regulation. It should be completely deregulated. It's how we treat it that possibly needs some regulation and some rules. But we really don't need this plant to be regulated. I mean, try the same thing, same train of thought with corn or barley or something else that we use as a foodstuff. And there's just no way to look at it that makes any sense if you only because of the THC. And it's mostly nonsense because the amount of THC present in these things is little to none. And the fear and the control is what's really going on. It has nothing to do with the crop or.
Well, that's not quite true, John. I mean, if you have completely seeded skunk, it's still going to be fucking high in THC. And it could be used not only for a seed crop, but you could also sit the seed crop and get resin from it. So, I mean, I'm not rationalizing their stupid laws, but it's not quite true that all varieties are going to have low THC. I mean,
I never made
Yeah,
that.
all John said was that he thought that the plant shouldn't be regulated. That's what he mentioned right there, which is definitely speaking to the choir in here and to everyone in chat, because we know that the plant shouldn't be regulated
what
at
if
all.
the plant produces 10% THC completely seeded? I'm not saying it should be regulated, but I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if it was completely seeded and it had 10% THC and you were growing it for the seeds, the THC would probably go by the wayside because you're harvesting for the seed. So the rest of it'll, you know, just fall by the wayside. Maybe some enterprising individual on the tractor has got a little hash collection box there, and they're shaking it off as the tractor goes through the field. But otherwise, it's just it's nonsense to think like that, because if you're getting it for seed, you're not going to be paying attention to the other part of it. You're going to be harvesting for the seed.
You want to throw all that nasty old resin away because you know it's practically valueless compared to the seed, right? Or
well, take it, sprinkle it in schoolyards.
So,
I think that
Anndrea, I have a question. From that 1,000 pounds of seed you get per acre, what is the typical yield you would expect to see for oil and protein?
well, that's a good question. And I have a cheat sheet and I'm going to grab it. And I think an important topic that comes up here is the cultivation for intent. I'm going to go grab the cheat sheet. Is cultivation for intent, just like with so many other applications, is that we've got this wonderful WMIS manual that's in all laboratories, and it tells us how to dispose of things properly, whether or not those things are necessarily toxic or not. It tells us how to dispose of things in a laboratory or in a food scenario. We go into a food production facility, we have a manual that tells us how to dispose of the chemicals or the waste products that are coming out of that facility. So I'm really moving to the concept that we have to put in, as somebody was saying, it's not about regulating the plant, but maybe some of the processes that are conducted have to be regulated so that we understand what happens to each one of the items that are coming off of this derivative process. I'm going to come back to you on some of the yields. I'm going to grab my cheat sheet here that's got my breakdown on it.
The processing facilities. The processing facilities that now are used to defat, soybeans, all have to be inspected, federally inspected. Here in the United States, it's the but not only the FDA, but the EPA impacts what kind of chemicals and what kind of discharges such facilities can have into their local sanitary sewers. So absolutely, there's a lot of regulation that governs the running of those processing facilities.
Mark, to get the right answer to that, you're going to have to ask Marcus, because he had protein isolate and oil measured at several different laboratories.
We have that as a data point. Let's get another data point from Anndrea here.
All right.
It's going to be way different.
Yeah, well, so
Anndrea.
Yes.
Anndrea, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Anndrea. So basically then these are just some sort of raw crunch numbers. Out of every 10 pounds, and we'll say in this case grain, and this has also been part of the language conversion that we've moved into. So we've got hemp seed. Well, we all know it's technically not a seed, it's an achene anyways, but hemp achene oil was never sexy. So it became hemp seed oil. So, and now I'm saying the word hemp seed, when you've got one word together, that is meaning hemp grain, and hemp seed, 2 words, means something you physically plant in the ground. So if we've got 10 pounds of grain and we cold press that, we're going to get approximately 8 pounds of press cake and approximately 2 pounds of oil. So as we know, around that 30 some odd % oil content. Now from that 8 pounds of cake, depending on the type of milling you're using, you're going to get approximately 3 pounds of 50% protein, and then it kind of breaks down from there depending on how you're sieving to get out the type of protein that you're looking for, versus something that's looking at a protein isolate that takes it even further and removes that insoluble fiber. And then if you're looking at hulled hemp or hemp hearts or shelled hemp or peeled hemp, depending on where you're at, you're about 2.5 to 3 pounds of grain go in to make 1 pound of hulled hemp. So when you're going to the store
orders
shelf,
of magnitude for a second. Let's play orders of magnitude. Okay, so if we take that 10 and we multiply it by 100, we get 1,000, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's the 1,000 pounds per acre, right? So that means I could take these numbers and multiply them by 100. So what you're telling me is that we can get 300 pounds of protein per acre. That is twice the amount that you get from soybean. Twice. Right?
And that's only classifying as 50% protein. That doesn't mean there's like 16% protein left over. So we're still only looking at a portion of the protein coming off.
Explain to us that refining process between press cake and the refined protein. I'd like to understand what those fractions are looking like. So when you go from the 8 pounds down to the 3 pounds, what is that 5 pounds you're removing? Is that casing? Is that stuff that can be used for like hog food, or I'm sure there's other food and feed application for that kind of protein as well. Could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely, and if anybody out there, we are definitely through the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance working on the feed side, but absolutely. So basically you've got your press cake. So you've done a cold pressing of the grain itself to get your hemp seed oil. That goes through its own filtration system or settlement system. Then that press cake that's left over is milled somehow. It could be put into like a hammer mill system. Kind of depends on the screen sizes that you're using, on how much protein you're going to be sieving out and how much insoluble fiber parts are going to be screened out from that. And those co-products are sold as human grade products, but absolutely they have application in the animal feed industry. And if we look at what's happened with omega eggs, that's all flax that's gone into that. The preliminary research has been done at the University of Manitoba to justify adding hemp as a chicken feed. And that's not just about like feed it to the chicken, but boy, they've got to, dissect the chickens. They have to examine what the egg color is. Does the egg smell? How does it cook up? All these things go into that. And that preliminary research, which we all want to say, hemp is so superior than everything else. But when we're doing this kind of research, it's really nice when we get statistics that say, they're really not that much different. And then that really actually in the feed industry helps us push along feed applications. But we have had a real tiresome time working underneath the Canadian Feeds Act, trying to get this research actually pushed through so that we can get it registered as an animal feed. And the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance has now put forth a motion to actually hire an expert that helps push along feed registrations, because there's a lot of inner working that has to go on. So the association has been pushing, but right now in Canada and in the US, industrial hemp is not registered as a livestock feed, but it is allowed in some EU member countries.
So here's a question for you, Anndrea. Recently, the Canadian government announced they were going to be changing or dropping some of the regulations in the hemp industry here. Can you speak a little bit about that? Something about amounts. I think some cultivars will no longer be tested for THC, something along those lines. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. One of the things I always put in every one of my presentations is an initial statement that Health Canada made, basically saying that, from industry and market demand, they chose to give the right to cultivate and exploit industrial hemp in a controlled fashion. So that, starting off, they had the right kind of concept. We demanded it, they saw value, and then they gave us permission to grow and exploit it, but in a controlled fashion. So we functioned within that controlled fashion, but we put our demands in place, which we've been demanding now for some time. But they basically came back and said, there is a notice to industry. You can find this over at the Hemp Section's website. And it basically comes forward with its exemptions, Section 56 class exemptions. And to read it verbatim, it says, these exemptions better aligns regulation of industrial hemp with that has demonstrated low public health and safety risk of the crop. So they're coming forward and saying, hey, this has really no risk, so we can change some of these regulations. So we were really happy. I can say they've sent now 3 versions, so they're also still finding typos. I think they tried to push this out as soon as possible. Some of those exemptions are going to be, as you were stating, talking about THC testing. Now, as I was saying earlier, industrial hemp in Canada is cultivated underneath the Canadian Seed Growers Association's regulation, Circular 6, which is in the process of being adopted in the US also by their certified seed organizations, of how to monitor and basically prove that you have a distinct cultivar to be added to this list. Now, the varieties that are being developed and maintained in that program will still need to have the THC test to show the legitimacy of the varieties to be on the list of approved cultivars, number one. So we're not completely exempt. We still have some of the back research, but absolutely now on the certified producer level, they are saying that most of the varieties that will be cultivated in Canada that are registered on the approved cultivar list and thus been maintained in a proper breeding program will be exempt from in-field THC analysis. This is great. They gave us an exemption already some years ago, probably about 5 or 6 years ago on some of the varieties. So we already had a small exemption policy in place. Now what we really need as a THC exemption policy is we need to remove the requirement for batch derivative testing on hemp foods produced from grain from crops that are grown in a pedigreed seed system. So we're still required by law to test all of the batches that come off the food processing facility to be 10 micrograms per gram or 10 parts per million or less THC in a food product. But we're saying, okay, we're getting producer exemptions, but what about the further exemptions that we need? So, we're still going to keep up the battle. Another part of the exemption policies that came forward, and part of the issues that were happening was that our license really expired on December 31st. Well, if you cultivated in 2016, by December 31st, 2016, the likelihood that you're still going to have grain sitting on your farm and in your bins is pretty high, actually. I mean, we started taking some of the 2016 organic crops, but the rest are still sitting in bins. So technically, everybody up until was still operating in violation of their license because they wouldn't have their new application in and approved by December 31st. So they've come forward and said, all right, we're going to extend the annual license, and the license will actually expire in March of the year following the cultivation. So that's a little something that makes it a little easier on the producers. In addition, they came forward with another beneficial producer change as part of their exemption in stating that the producers can report where and which cultivar they're cultivating a minimum of 15 days after sowing. Because part of the problem is here I'm sitting, well, we're finally getting some snow here in Manitoba, but I'm sitting on my farm somewhere and I'm trying to make a cultivation plan, and I think I'm going to put my hemp somewhere, but when I come out to go and sow that hemp, my field is wet, or something else has come up in my cultivation, my rotation that I want to change. So you've got to apply in the beginning, and then you had to call them back and say, oh, I've changed it, or I've changed it again, or it didn't get planted. So this will be another aided. Also, some of the other things that they came forward with was that the criminal record checks will be now valid for 1 year. I tell you, sometimes, I mean, I've been a hemp sampler now on my own since 2005, and I still have to get a criminal record check every single year. And I still have to prove that I know what I'm doing every single year, which is sort of like, at what point in time do we stop this making us farmers or people working in the hemp industry feel like we're criminals and I've got to go down and get my criminal record check?
When we get rid of the politicians that are making those rules, there are a bunch of stupid politicians who are depending on old folks, people from rest homes, and other people like that who they go and poll, and they'll be sitting there on the porch at the rest home going, I think they should not make marijuana legal yet. But in truth of the matter is it's all about control. It still comes always back to the same issue of control. And can I ask you a question, Anndrea? Is there another seed crop that you know of, another cultivar of any other plant that provides the amount of seed diversity crop than pot? Is there another one that I don't know about?
Not that I know of. I mean, I know you can make, some fibers out of soy fibers also, but no, there's no plant. We all know this. Anybody tuning into Hash Church for the first time or for what episode are we on here, know that there's no plant that is as diverse. And I really think that, this plant is here to serve us, and it wants to grow so that it best serves us, so that we can serve it. It's like its own circular motion with this whole cannabis plant that we're all involved in. And yeah, so I definitely agree that, the bureaucracy surrounding this, but we're forcing the hand from the hemp side, and a lot of the people that are from within the medical cannabis access, the medical marijuana access program here in Canada, know that they've now brought us to this one table. So we're really thankful that we were asked to come to the table to have a cannabis discussion, and that hemp is being thought of. How is that going to impact? I can say some interesting things. They're going to now let us submit our application electronically. Thank you for that simple thing. An interesting one on the new application for the licensing is in section 6.1, the statement. They are calling you out to make sure you sure in the hell know that you are not supposed to be touching those flowering parts of this hemp plant. It says, I attest that the proposed derivatives will not be produced from whole industrial hemp plants, including the sprouts or the leaves, flowers, or bracts of those plants. So the Canadian hemp industry, from the licensing side, is realizing that potentially that's going to be a risk, and it's going to be even viewed more of a risk because another one of their exemptions, which is amazing, says there is no longer a minimum acreage requirement. It used to be a minimum of 10 acres, but now I can grow 1 acre because they've removed the minimum acreage quantity, which this actually helps a lot of smaller producers, especially we'll say in the Eastern Maritime, that are operating maybe from 8-acre parcels. And so that's an amazing exemption right there, that they've actually said, we now know that we can cultivate industrial hemp on smaller acreage, and it's still not going to be a risk to the Canadian people.
Well, so they're obviously, they're obviously
grown in big giant zones, and it's also grown in the garden. Hasn't harmed anybody. And what's the real difference between a corn crop and a pot seed crop? Really none. There's no real difference. We're just being force-fed the idea that there is a perceived difference, that it'll put some people in danger, and that's just not the truth. We have to completely deregulate it. We have to get politicians out of it the same way we've got to get politicians out of practicing medicine. They don't know what they're doing. They're not doctors. They're certainly not plant botanists. They're not biologists. They're not scientists. And given that they have zero expertise in any of these fields, why do we let them set the rules for it? It's always been my question. Sorry if I interrupted anyone.
Anndrea, I have a question for you. California just passed Prop 64, which will allow for industrial hemp here in California. And I was wondering, since you've got now a decade of insight, where would you suggest that Californian cannabis hemp growers start, because this is a whole new industry starting. We have no decorticators, we have no machinery, we have literally starting at ground zero.
Yeah, well, thankfully I've been asked this question, so I've had some time to formulate some thought. And, you know, always first, I always want to look to say, like, you know, what type of infrastructure do we have? And that's one of the things you immediately comment on is infrastructure. What kind of agricultural practices do we already have that we can quickly incorporate industrial hemp into? So when I was talking with Tony, the student at the university there that got the DEA permit with the school to start doing some work, the first and foremost thing that will be done will be variety trials. Those will either be varieties that are going to be imported in, or types that are going to come out of current cultivation breeding programs that are going to be able to be moved forward to be registered in the state of California. So after talking with Tony, I said, okay, well, what's around you? What makes sense? And he says, oh, we have this huge cattle ranch industry. Bam, right there. Okay, so now let's start talking about silage trials. There's some amazing work coming out of Belgium and in the EU of actually chopping hemp quite young and making feed silage for the animals. Amazing what they're showing on the increase in milk production, on the decrease in prolapses, and a prolapse is when a cow or an animal pushes out its uterus. So in the decrease in those things, which means an ease of birth is easier. They were digesting better. So, you know, looking at what, okay, well, how can we get other people excited about this that might not be so excited about industrial hemp? So first of all, it's going to be about varieties, and it's going to be about, you know, really finding the allies in the non-traditional hemp industries to come forward and come to the table. That's really what's going to be key. And if we've got ranchers there, let's get out and talk to those ranchers, find out what they need. Some years ago, when Vermont passed their legislation, the rural Vermont went around and started interviewing and asking people, what do you need? What do you need? And their biggest struggle was that they needed organic animal bedding. That was what they needed. So it was like, okay, well, so now maybe we have to kind of refocus about where we were trying to push, because now we're hearing that this is the commodity that we need. This is a product we need. So how can we use this plant to provide that product? And now they've actually
quickly people, the herd from the hemp plant is what is being used for the animal bedding. So they're decorticating it and then just using the herds because it's biologically sound. It's very good.
And also you could use the non-woven mats. I mean, depending on what kind of animals you were raising, if you were using bunnies or other types of animals of that sort, or rabbits, you could use the mats also that are made from the long fibers.
I love the hemp desk that you have behind you. You have like a hemp museum behind you, and I'm really just loving it. It's just hemp everywhere. It's awesome. And I wanted to welcome Clint. He's come in under the name James Palmer in the room. He is working down in Kentucky. Is it Kentucky?
Tennessee.
Tennessee, that's right. So
yeah, down in Middle Tennessee.
Tennessee. So I invited him in today just to be a part of the hemp conversation, and I thought it would be nice to get some back and forth. So I wanted to welcome him as well, and everyone else to the room. D420K is busting out some dry sift while we talk.
Hard.
Yeah, while we talk.
I just wanted to mention too that the finest fiber is actually produced from all male crops before they flower. So no females at all, 100% male. And that can be produced also in seed form. So you can produce a crop that is 100% male, kind of similar to what you do when you produce 100% feminized seed. So it's possible, but nobody's done it.
I had a question in regards to the licensing that you mentioned, how Health Canada is being specific about them not touching the flowers. Do you think that it's a pretty big issue right now with hemp farmers taking those flowers and trying to get the CBD extracted off of them? Because I know quite a few people that are doing it, and I was always surprised because the mechanism's not there, and I would always just say, well, just, you know, be careful, because the last thing you want to do is get into a situation where this farmer is getting in trouble and he's no longer able to grow the crop.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we know from that exemption statement on the new application that Health Canada knows it's happening. And we're in an interesting position where we've got this medical access program. And I mean, I know there's whole issues with that, with adult use and everything of that sort. But for those of us that are within that system, it is really nice to be able to place that call, get that safe exchange to get our medicines to us. So I'm really thankful that I'm live here to be able to work in that environment. Now, with that said, I also see our farmers with all this material coming off the back of their machines that could be incorporated even back in through our medical marijuana system and access program. Because I've seen, what I've heard from some of these, the licensed producers is that, maybe they're out of their CBD product because they can't grow enough, but we've got all this acreage. So the question comes to be is how do we get it from the legal industrial hemp section and then meander through our Controlled Substance Act and our Narcotics Acts to get that back into a legal system that shows a safe, clean, good product is being sold on the marketplace. Yeah, I mean, they absolutely know it's happening. There are products out there that are being marketed as, hemp flower product. We do have a legal language, and essentially, in Canada, if it's 0.3% or less and it's a cannabis plant, it's called industrial hemp. If it's more than that, legally in Canada, it's basically marijuana because that's what our regulations are called. They're not called the medical cannabis program. It actually has the word marijuana in it. So that becomes an interesting point to say, how do we get that material back in out of the hemp and in? But they absolutely know what's happening. And of course, farmers could be jeopardizing themselves. And yeah, it seems like a really great thing when somebody calls you up and say, hey, you send me a 50-pound bag of that hemp flower, I'll pay you $500.
Well, it's a huge added value. It's a huge added value.
Well, in the long run, nobody will be trying to make CBD from hemp when you can grow a variety that has practically no THC and is over 20% CBD. I mean, come on. In the long run.
But Sam, listen, no, it's not. Because listen, there's thousands of acres of it growing around the world. And with an extraction process like Anndrea's, who can come in and defat the oil to 100% defatted, produce a gold oil, produce hemp protein powder isolate that is non-destructive. It's actually in the embryo casing still, in that same shape and everything, 63+% protein isolate powder, at least 30. No, I'm not finished. Please let me finish. And the same process that does that, 5,000 pounds at a time, he can extract the CBD. Why would you throw that away, even if you could grow a 20% THC when you're literally throwing away tons of CBD isolate?
I'm saying that why would you want to process material that's 2% CBD or
why
less?
Not? Why not?
When you can process material that's 20%, it doesn't make logical sense.
Well, it does when you can process. It does when you can process thousands of pounds at a time. Those numbers. The reason it makes sense is because we're not allowed to. That's the reason it makes sense.
Well,
that we're allowed to grow hemp.
If you're allowed to do it with 2% CBD variety, you can also do it with 20% CBD variety in the long run. I'm talking about, and that's what people will do.
Yeah, maybe, but in the meantime, there's thousands of kilos of CBD sitting all over North America right now that is CBD. It's not any lower of a quality. It's CBD. If you extract it and isolate it,
I'm not talking about the quality.
Mountains of it. Mountains of it.
I'm not talking about the quality.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'm talking about the yield.
Yes, I know. I'm just saying that when you have an efficient extraction method, that which Anndrea has, it still makes sense because you can get mountains of it. And if it's not planted at 20% CBD, there's mountains of it to get, you're going to get it. That's all I'm saying. Maybe one day we'll be growing 20% CBD hemp. I highly doubt it, but if we are, great, then he'll extract that as well while he defats the oil.
I presume that is what will happen.
I hope so.
People are going to grow 2% CBD if they could be growing 20% CBD, and CBD is the target of the crop.
If is the big thing. And the reason I'm on the other side is because the if isn't there. We can't. We're not allowed to. But the if is on our side for being able to access lower percentage CBD, and it's just sitting there rotting on fields. I know a ton of people that are trying to access it, not doing the greatest job. Colorado seems to be killing it because they don't have the same limitations on their statewide hemp licensing. In Colorado, trying to extract cannabis, marijuana, the active, the drug compound, with butane is very difficult. You have to jump through major hoops. But if you want to go and do it with hemp, there is literally not the same hoops set up. So that's what I mean by the if.
But the dirty secret is that if it's 0.3% in the plant, when you concentrate it in the oil form, it goes greater than 0.3%.
Yes.
Bingo.
Okay.
Yeah, but here in Canada, we're allowed to do that as long as you can break it down into a product that you sell that is 30 milligrams per ml. You could do the same thing in Colorado. You don't have to sell it pure. You can dilute it and sell it that way.
I get you, Marcus. I know exactly what you're saying, but this goes to show you what happens when regulators who don't understand what the fuck they're doing set regulation. They don't realize that when you take a plant that's 0.3% and you concentrate it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Did you want to say a few words to us today, Clint, on what's going on in Tennessee and what you're involved in?
Yeah, I was actually going to say something to what Mark just said. Most of the time when you're having these conversations with politicians, you kind of skip that question. That's not something that you bring up, is the fact that when you concentrate a 0.3 plant, that it's going to get above that. It's the conversation comes along later when you get into rules and regulations. About a year or so into it, they realize that when it's extracted and concentrated, it's going to get above 1%. So, well, yeah. So what I'm doing, and I'm at MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University, and I'm a PhD student candidate doing molecular bioscience. And started off and been kind of working in the labs, doing all types of different stuff, everything from tissue culture. Spent the last couple months working on the chromatography, doing HPLC work, UPLC, and GC, working with standards and getting the standard curve all built, and working with 11 different cannabinoids and 25 different terpenes right now. And it's been a lot of fun. You see all these tests being done and stuff being labeled, and the need for standardized testing. And I don't think you really realize it until you actually go into a chromatography lab and you have to build out like 30 different programs, methods to get good separations. And it's something that really, there is good literature out there, but it really comes down to your machine and your lab that's involved to get to your testing. So that's been a lot of fun. It's really difficult to actually try and learn how to do this with literature searches because of the drug testing that's been going on for so long and the research that's behind that. So most of the time when you're looking up chromatography stuff with cannabis, the majority of it's all linked back to drug testing. And so as a researcher, it's been kind of frustrating just getting into the actual science side of it, and the separation side of it is the fact that drug testing is the majority of the research out there.
I will never forget that how we got hemp growing in Manitoba was by lying to our Minister of Agriculture and our Minister of Finance. We just told them straight. Now, our lies were little white lies. When we said it was a $1 trillion crop, we believed that. It was a $1 billion crop in the 30s. Why not a $1 trillion crop in the year 1995 or 94? And so, but the lie that we told them for sure was that it's a distant relative of marijuana. Hemp, it's like a cousin. She's quite different. She's not.
You see, politicians could buy into a lie because that's how they do everything.
Yes. And if you promote that lie, if you fuel that lie with profits, with the promise of profits, that's all they hear, especially a finance minister. He just was like, is it profitable? Can you get around the drug content? Can we grow this legally? Boom, like less than a year later, Manitoba's growing hemp. That was a pretty huge thing, considering the people who were our biggest supporters said, yeah, that will happen when pigs fly. You will get hemp growing in the Bible Belt when pigs fly. Pigs flew fast.
You use the magic incantation word, though.
Yeah, greed.
Yeah.
At Pink Floyd, you ever see Pink Floyd?
Oh
If you
yeah.
ever see Pink Floyd, you will see pigs fly.
Yeah,
Pigs
I
do
did.
fly.
Okay, on a side
Neither.
note, on a side note, Mark, my first Pink Floyd concert, 1994, the Division Bell. I'm on the floor. I'm on psychedelic mushrooms, probably more than I should be on around other people. Absolutely
That big
more.
ball on stage, the big.
No, you won't even
big
believe
thing.
this. I was next to the ball. It was on the floor, the big trichome that opened up. Okay, but
Yeah.
then the pigs. When the 2 songs before pigs started, 2 songs before, the pigs, which come out of the speakers, they inflate them slowly.
Right.
I was so high on mushrooms, I saw them inflating this pig out of the speaker, and it looked like a naked woman lying on her side. But then she got bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally, at one point, I scream out, "Oh my God, they're fucking pigs." Okay, now get this. The 2 people sitting in front of me both weighed 400 pounds each. And I'll tell you, when they turned around and looked at me, I've never had a worse feeling in all of my life. I shrunk down. I shrunk like Fred Flintstone down to like nothing. I was like, and then it took a whole song and a half before the pigs came out of the speakers and they turned around and apologized to me because they had given me this death glance thinking I was calling them fucking pigs. Anyway, side note to the story. Thought I'd make everyone laugh. It's a true story. You can't make this shit up.
I have a question for Clint. Going back to hemp here, I actually served at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, so I know how very fickle the weather there is in Tennessee. There, so when can you get your hemp in the ground, and can you only get 1 crop a year in there?
Depends on the varieties. We've had a couple farmers do multiple rotations of finola in a year. Other than that, no, majority of it's just one harvest. Yeah, it's been really good every year. This year was kind of difficult. We had a pretty severe drought. We're just getting over right now, but normally we get about 58 inches of rainfall here in the mid-state, which is more than enough. Actually, probably a little more than we need, but luckily historical trends are that October is our dry year or dry month, and so it's normally all right. This getting the seed in the ground originally was an issue. We just basically originally the state rules and regs allowed for licenses or applications to be put in until April 1st, which delayed our seed order. And so we've worked with our Department of Ag to change that, and they're actually doing seed orders earlier this year. They're taking applications currently. So that was the main thing. Is it's just timing, for especially when it's your state's first year. Getting the DEA permit takes time, and you have to have everything in line, and it's kind of a learning process for everybody involved. But once you get through that, and you can start reaching out for more cultivars, and it's actually gotten to a point where I think we're going to have a pretty good cultivar list this year. We should be getting seeds in hopefully by March this year. So I would imagine there's going to be some people doing some early seed planting trials just to see if Dewey was right. So yeah, it should be a really good next year. I'm really excited for 2017 hemp here in the state of Tennessee. There should be some really good options for people. The Department of Ag is going to be allowing us to do extractions finally. They were against it in the beginning, just kind of wanting to stay within what they consider the federal guidelines and the latest statement by the USDA, but it's just a statement. And after more research, they've come to determine that we should be able to do it. And they were wanting us to be allowed to do it, be able to make a product and sell it out of state. But in the meantime, other states' products are currently being sold in our state. And so the issue came up, and I told them that was absolutely crazy, that we can go to any of our major cities, buy a CBD product, or we can get on walmart.com and order it, but we can't sell it. We can process it here, but we couldn't sell it here. So I think they understand now, and I think that'll open up the market. We're really in need of some processing in the state, and I think that'll be something that'll kind of push us over the top for investment. What's the total acreage being grown there in 17? Don't know about 17 yet. I know 16 was, I think it was actually only about 600 actually planted. Again, there was over 1,000 that was originally going to be planted, and went down to 600. I believe there was some people that actually are just storing seeds for next year, so they can plant a little bit earlier. I think that was the reason why we had a lot of acreage not planted this year.
Well, I'll tell you, when we first applied for our license, there was no application, if you can imagine. Zero application to apply for a hemp license in Canada in 1994. You just sort of sent a piece of paper saying, hey, we wanted to do this. And they would send a piece of paper back saying, well, you know, you got to kind of do this and this and that. And it just went back and forth, back and forth. It was this little dude named, I think his name was Ross. Ross Hossey comes to mind, or Adrian Nahas. Yeah, Adrian Nahas. I mix up the two names of the guy that's killed the bunnies with the smoke and the guy
Gabriel Nahas.
Gabriel. So it was Ross. It was Ross Hossey who ran the Health Canada. Him and his secretary, and like all of 3 people in 30 years had applied for a license to grow like a plant on their windowsill or whatever. People didn't know we had the right in Canada to apply for this license until the mid-90s. You know, a very few people.
So Clint, I have a question. Since depending on what you're going to grow product-wise, depending on how you're going to grow your hemp, depending on how you're going to grow your seed per square meter, how did you deduce then at what products you're going to make use of your acreage? Because other farmers are probably looking around you going, well, what should we get into? This is a whole new process. And out here in California, we just got this whole process. So we're starting at ground zero. So we have farmers who are going to be looking to make the same decision. I have this amount of acreage, I've got this hemp, what do I grow it for? Because there's no infrastructure for a market of a product there. You literally have to, from seed to product, you have to create it from the ground up.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, that's the main thing, is having some form of processing, whether it just be as simple as having a seed press, a seed cleaner. You know, it's not real expensive to get into the seed business on a small scale. And you know, most of everything that I know, guys, I learned from Miss Anndrea. So like, she could probably tell you 10 times better than I could about this, but I can tell you about Tennessee and how it's gone. And it's that without a processor set up, not a lot's going to get done. And so it just really goes back to your processor. You know, if you have somebody with a seed press, just for instance, this year, my girlfriend and I did an acre, and because of lack of processing in the state, we ended up doing a hemp maze, and had a lot of people come out. As really educational, and we had a buyer come in and buy our whole crop, and he was going to store it to do something with it whenever he brought it on his own processing, but there is yet to be anybody in our state. So really not a lot of the crop's been sold. I think some of it's been sold out of state, but until somebody sets up that small seed facility, which luckily in your state, you have people that are already in this industry. So in our state, it's we're looking around at people that are in different industries where you guys already have money in your cannabis industry in your state. And I think it should be pretty easy for somebody to set up a small seed processing facility.
Maybe maybe Anndrea and I will come set that up one day soon.
I will welcome you.
And just to make a note here, on the total acreage in the U.S. last year, there were approximately 16,000 acres, which was about 144% increase over what was cultivated in 2015. As most people know, probably tuning in, is that we've had the agricultural industrial hemp bill, farm bill came into play in 2014. So we've seen a big increase. And I'm just reading this from a great group called Seed CX, and they're actually putting out some really good press releases and information about hemp CBD, and they're really trying to see how do we move this to being a commodity. But from their report, Clint, it says here that was in 2016 there were 1,185 acres registered in Tennessee in 2016.
Hey James, you need a 500-pound seed extractor from me, because when we're done, you've got the perfect golden oil, no green in it whatsoever, and you have the protein isolate at a 62.5% yield, higher than any other known process on earth at this particular point in time. And also the much better yield of the oil. The oil tastes like walnut oil when it's done this way. And you just start off with already hulled seeds, and it takes about 20 minutes per load to completely extract 500 pounds out of whack.
Well, I think that our state's getting to a point where we can definitely sit you down with folks we just need a little push in our state. Kentucky's been doing well for themselves, and a lot of that's due to the fact that their Department of Agriculture has a voted in commissioner, and we have an appointed commissioner by the governor. So their voted in commissioner can allow them to do a little bit more. So Kentucky's actually been able to bring in a lot more processing on pretty much all sides of the plant, from seed to extraction. So yeah, I would love to bring some of your expertise in, and we do have companies that do contract manufacturing in the States, and big FDA approved facilities that are ready.
We provide a machine in a steel frame on a sled, all inclusive. Hook it up to power, open it up, load it, hit the start button. And that's basically about as straightforward and as easy as it gets.
How many of those machines have you sold so far, Anndrea? How many people actually have them in their hands using them?
Throughout the world, there's 7 in other countries, including we have a 2,500 kilo operating model in the Midwest in Kansas. And all of them have a perfect safety record. There's never been a fire. There's never been any loss of gas. There's never been any incidents whatsoever. In fact, 2 of those systems were in other buildings where that building burned down around our facility, and our facility didn't burn. And it's so fire safe that the day after the fire, we went in, hooked the electricity back up, and continued recovering on the machine where the building burned down around it. And it was a textile factory. And so when it burned down, it melted the 8-inch steel beams down from the ceiling to the floor like puddles on the floor. But we've never had any.
So fire does melt steel beams. You heard it here on Hash Church.
Your machine sounds like the epitome of safeness. What I'm wondering is, how long is the delivery time? If somebody orders the 2,500 kilo one today, how long before he has it in his hands?
Well, the 2,500 kilo model takes a little bit longer than the other. From the day we accept a deposit, I'll say this about it. We will deliver within 12 to 14 weeks on nearly all the sizes that I offer. And I'm offering from 10 pounds to 50 pound, 100, 500, 1,000, 2,500, and 5,000 kg models.
I like the 2,500. That sounds like, it'd be convenient to have a handful of those.
I've seen it. It's really ridiculous.
Well, Mark could put up a few pictures of the 2,500 kilo model that we have in Kansas that operates all the time. It's a 100% functioning. It was our first pilot plant we ever built, and it's a little tougher than they need be. I manufactured it out of cold rolled 1 3/4 inch 3/16 stainless steel. Now we don't use that thick because we realize that place is a good place to go at the end of the world, because there's plenty of room inside, and 1 3/4 inch cold rolled 3/16 stainless steel is going to keep you very safe in there. And we even got an 800-gallon catch tank on that particular model. But right now we're building another 2,000-gallon catch tank for another model that's in another country, because they want to run a continuous process where they load the machine up, extract it down into the chamber, seal it off, dump it, and load it again, and continue on at it like that. And in addition to that, my guy who builds these is currently working on the ever-turning screw model. And it's a great big giant rotating screw that continually feeds material through it, continually soaks it in gas, ejects the old material out one side at the bottom, and puts the oily gas in a catch chamber from the other side.
So that would be a true continuous operation.
Yeah, that would be a true continuous operation. It wasn't until Viton seals and in conjunction with Teflon came out, that we were able to start working on a functioning model of that, because well, you just have to understand the way it might work, that the seals would be very important. And but anyway, it's going to be a reality, because some initial testing we've done with that proves that the seals are going to be tough enough to stand up to it.
It's got to be better than a batch system. No matter how fast the batch system is, this one will be faster.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I came up with it in the first place. I mean, we know that there's a lot of processes in the world that will greatly be enhanced if they had a system that wasn't a batch system. Batch system, you always got to, no matter what you're collecting it in, you still got to open it up, dump it out, put a new one in, and get everything going. If you have a continuous system going, then it's just, you know, the only thing that should slow you down is if you run out of stuff to put in it. But I don't think that that's going to happen.
Continuous systems often have to be cleaned out because gunk starts to build up. So
no, not
where
in
your continuous system is going to be running all the time, you're not going to have a chance to clean it out in between batches. So that's the one downside of running a continuous system, and you might have to have it down for a lot longer period of time than you would like to.
Well, sir, let me educate you for a moment here, which is tough to do because you're a pretty smart guy. You're a pretty smart fellow. But the way we handle that is we just run a cleaning cycle. We stop the machine, stop feeding the biomass in for a second. And by the way, since it is hydrocarbon extraction, it's continually cleaning itself. It's always cleaning itself. Every turn of the screw is cleaning itself because the hydrocarbon's washing the walls down. That's why the big issue was the seals that would actually make a seal and keep it together and not die right away. But anyway, that's
Are you sure you invented this, Anndrea? I'm pretty sure I read about it in a Poe short story called The Turn of the Screw.
It was in a Hollywood movie. I'm pretty sure I saw it in a Hollywood movie.
It's in a Poe short story, and it's The Turn of the Screw.
That was exactly the thing that made me think of it. I carry that story in my heart and have since a child. The only thing that I liked better was the one where the big blade swinging back and forth, pitting the pendulum.
Yep.
But hard to work that into an extraction machine, you know. Okay.
Well, all I will say is this, you know, because we are talking about hemp, but what Anndrea, I have never in my life seen hemp oil like that of which Anndrea sent me from this extraction process. It was the cleanest, nicest, tastiest oil I have ever had from hemp, and I mean by miles. It wasn't green, it was gold, and it wasn't like gold because it was run through like charcoal filter, which you can do with green hemp oil and remove that chlorophyll sort of taste and color. But his protein powder isolate was completely intact, and that actually freaked me out. It was a bag of embryos that were white, like with the seeds removed. He even gets the tannins out of the seed husk. He can extract the seed husks and get a product from that. So not only can he get perfectly gold oil, perfectly produced protein powder isolate that is like way higher in protein powder. Like it was 13% higher than Manitoba Harvest's. When I took Manitoba Harvest seed, sent it to him from a grocery store, had him extract it, had him sent it back to me in BC and tested it in 3 different labs, it was 13% higher than the company that bragged about having the highest protein powder isolate, which is to me a pretty big deal that he could just do that in an afternoon in Kansas. Just like, oh yeah, you want me to make the nicest, highest quality oil that's on the planet that no one, and since this, if you guys can both imagine this, I have contacted Manitoba Harvest. I think they were terrified, to be honest. It was before they sold their company. Then I contacted Zach from the Compass Group and told him about it. And he said, oh, you got to talk to Mike Fata about it. He's the boss now. Well, Mike Fata would not return my calls. And so then I talked to another company they owned, Hemp Oil Canada, and Sean did not return my calls. And then I offered it to Ben Dronkers, and Ben Dronkers absolutely returned my call. and put me in touch with Mark, his gentleman that runs things for him in Europe. So I put this both out to you as well, Clint and Anndrea. We're looking for places to put this. We're looking for places to get these oils and these protein powder isolates extracted, both products created at the exact same time. And then, you know, luckily enough, if possible, if it's ever allowed, the same process will extract all of the cannabinoids off of the plant, which I think was probably one of the things that Ben was most interested in.
Anndrea, could you imagine that by the same crop that you're growing now, that we could actually feed maybe 12% more people because we had a more efficient process and have 12% more material to work with?
Absolutely. I've got some stars written down here. I think this is very interesting. I'm interested on the impact on shelf life. All kinds of things started turning in my brain that were exciting. And I have a spot to be able to house one of those. So let's talk about what that looks like. I think this is an interesting something.
Shelf life is through the roof. You won't believe it. Honestly, you won't believe it. Like when he says what he's about to say, you're going to think he's lying. Go ahead, Anndrea.
No, I was just going to say shelf life is vastly extended. By the way, you're supposed to be sending me a 5-pound bucket for Dr. Natasha to see that she's giving you the evil eye right now. I can see down in the little window there of the thing that we haven't got that accomplished yet. But the shelf life on these things is incredible because, number one, there's no chlorophyll in the oil, and the chlorophyll is the first thing to die off in the oil, in the bottle, on the shelf, even if it's in a dark bottle and in a cold place in the refrigerator.
Reality check. What goes bad in seed oils? What goes bad in seed oils are the polyunsaturates that will react with oxygen and air and light. Have nothing to do with chlorophyll whatsoever. Okay,
that's absolutely true.
Okay, but look at it this way. The bottles that have the chlorophyll in it die off 3 times faster than bottles that we make without the chlorophyll. You can draw whatever inference you want from that, but the inference I draw from it is because there's no chlorophyll in it, the oil lasts longer. And because of the way it's...
I think what's probably happening is you're preserving the vitamins better, so you probably have a better vitamin E profile, so you have more antioxidants. You're probably also preserving other compounds that have antioxidant potential, so you're preserving the life of the oil longer.
But why is he preserving it? Why is he preserving it?
Because he's extracting natural antioxidants.
Because the chlorophyll is gone.
That's one thing.
It's affecting it, I guarantee you.
Of course, it could be affecting it in some way, but the fats that are oxidizing and what you're smelling when fat goes bad, that rancidity, that's exactly what Mark's saying. Those are the long-chain fatty acids that are oxidizing in the air.
It's inhibited by vitamin E, which is tocopherol, right? And the tocopherols is what is being extracted out. It's not the presence of the pigment, it's the presence of the tocopherols that's stabilizing the oil. But again, that stabilization is only temporary. It won't last a whole long time. It'll still go bad. Even oil with a lot of tocopherol eventually goes bad because it's stoichiometrically consumed in its stabilization.
Other compounds too. You're also, I'm guessing there's probably other compounds that we don't even know about. Exactly. Flavonoids, other things that increase the shelf life stability.
And that's my point.
And have an antioxidant effect.
What you just said. And there's probably things that we don't know about. Back to Anndrea, what he's noticing is when the chlorophyll is gone, the oil, when it's gold, it tastes so much better. Compared to, and I know there's a temperature variance because cold pressing, which is a misnomer at best, as Anndrea quoted to me almost 20 years ago when he told me this, they're heating it up to hundreds of degrees when they press those cakes. Anndrea's process is actually very, very, very cold, like very cold, not like room temperature cold, but like freeze your fucking hand off cold. And so there's probably some sort of preservation going on big time in there. But there's no denying that when the chlorophyll is present, the oil goes bad much faster. So maybe it's something that's maybe it's affecting, maybe it's producing more oxygen as it dies. I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
I think it's just an indicator, Mark. It's just an indicator that you've pulled over a lot more polar materials that, But I think John's extraction is going to be a lot cleaner, and it's going to grab a lot of the natural beneficial antioxidants like tocopherols and flavonoids, which are all redox active compounds. And what I mean by that is that when you shine light on that and there's free radicals that are generated, these things are going to start intercepting these things and quenching these free radicals. So the oil is just more stable.
And
well, let me say
stable.
I have one question for you. If you pour your super clean oil on a table and let it sit there for a few months, does it turn into varnish like every other hemp seed oil?
I have no idea. I've never done that particular thing, and I wouldn't even begin to know how to answer you on that. But let me say this about that, the situation with the oil. I'm getting ready to publish a book, maybe by the end of next year, where I have taken all of the oils over years that I have extracted and put them through a procedure where I put a drop of the oil on top of a drop of purified water in a petri dish and float it in a little puddle of liquid nitrogen. It freezes the whole thing rock solid. I then take the petri dish out and stick it in a box where I have a microscope that is always at 5 degrees Celsius. It's always that temperature in the box. So as the water starts to thaw out first and then the oil starts to thaw out on top of that, it will produce the flower, or the thing that is the precursor to seed in the plant that looks like a flower, no matter what size it is, in a crystalline form in the oil. Now, I've taken 70,000 such photographs of all different types of plants and oils. So what my idea is, if you take that very same oil and heat it, and then subject it to the very same conditions again, all you get is an ice cube. So what I think is happening is, and I know I'm going to run into some people out there who are going to say, oh God, religion. I don't think it's religion, but I think the life force, the living force that's in the seed comes across with the oil and is present in it, because it'll produce.
Are different varieties of cannabis different in the way they appear? I mean, wide leaf, narrow leaf, hemp, drug varieties?
Yes.
Are they different?
The cultivar, no matter what it is, it doesn't just have to be pot. Whatever the cultivar is, it will produce the flower of that plant in perfect crystalline form. I mean, you will be looking at it. It won't have color. It'll be like sunflower. Sunflower oil produces the quintessential sunflower appearance. The petals to the outside and very complicated on the inside. And I think all of these things are the life force that's present in that plant. It's specific, and it comes out under those circumstances only. I don't know another way to produce that phenomenon, number one. And number two, I can't begin to explain what that phenomena is, except for that anecdotally I have noticed that if I do it with a living oil, I've tried it with all other brand of oils, Young Living oils, all the various types of oils that you can buy and try, and none of them produced a living crystal. And the only ones that produce a living crystal are ones extracted this way at great cold. And
Major preservation.
Something's going on there, but I'm not going to, Dr. Natasha can give you her explanation of how it's certain free radicals, and somebody else can look at it this way and that way. But, explain to me where the flower in the oil comes from, and then I'll listen to all the rest of your theories for the rest of my life with my mouth shut.
Listen, even when you mention it, generally people with PhDs in the room, they're just smiling, this sort of smug, like, oh, Anndrea's talking about the crystals on the flowers again.
I think the reason why there's that look is because Anndrea's discussing things that can't be proven or disproven by science. So it can be repeated.
But what if he shows it to you?
But
it's an experiment.
I would love to see it.
It's an experiment that can be repeated, though, Natasha. It's not some one-off thing.
No, I'm not denying that it's not true and that you're not seeing what you're seeing, but I'm saying your interpretation of what's happening is hard to say that that's correct or incorrect, because that's not, you know what I'm saying?
Not
No,
claiming
And
that
I
I know
don't
the
know what
answer.
it would be. I think it's a very interesting thing. I would love to see the pictures. I like to keep an open mind, so I'm more laughing
guess-
about the concept of trying to prove the wording you're saying with science, because they're like science is a method. It's we're
Dr.
talking of different
Nishimoto,
things.
the guy that does the water,
Yeah, Emoto.
he's the one that turned me on to the idea of doing this, because I became friends with him over the years. And you can look on his website and see some of these very crystals that I'm talking about that he published way back when.
In water.
My particular book that I have, I'm not sharing any of the pictures yet because I don't want to preempt the book. The book is going to come out as a big coffee table book, and I want it to make it splash the way it's going to. Look, I've been taking these pictures for years. I've had an extraction chamber with a 6-inch window and a light to look into the chamber and see what's going on. I imagine pretty much nobody else on earth has seen some of the things I've seen going on in that.
And that's the thing, Anndrea, that people don't believe that there are things going on earth that they don't know about. And I agree. I was one of them. And it wasn't really until Skunkman Sam showed me his secret that I fell off the horse. I completely was like, that is just there's shit in the world that is seemingly impossible that you don't know about until you see it and experience it. And until then, you'll just be a doubting Thomas, like doubting Thomas was, right? Wasn't he the one that got to touch the incorporeal body of Christ, the story goes, because he was the big doubter? Maybe Natasha will get to see the oil crystallize in your machine one day.
Well, hey, Mark, you can show the picture of the small catch chamber, or the bottom chamber that has the 2 big windows on it, if you want them to see it. And that'll be the 2 windows that I've been staring in for 13 years.
Right.
And the universe has been undressing for me in those windows.
Well, I feel the same way with the macro lens for myself. You know, once I started taking macro photographs, I entered a world that I had no idea existed. And my macro world doesn't even go in as far as it, well, obviously it seemingly goes forever. As Terence McKenna says, how come the deeper in you go, the bigger it gets?
Yeah, I'm totally agree. Listen, the first time when I wasn't sure when I built the big chamber, when I decided to put 2 big 6-inch windows in it, what I was going to see, if anything, except bubbles. And when I turned the light on and we were reducing the bird feed sunflower oil and removing the gas from it, I saw all these crystals started appearing in the bubbles as the gas was coming out of the oil, and they would spread across the surface of it and then remelt and go back into it. And I was mesmerized. I stood there for 4 hours looking in this window, and my son stood looking in the other window. And 4 hours later, we realized we were fucking starving to death, hungry. But it seemed like just a few minutes had gone by, because the wonder of seeing those things in that window was just beyond mesmerizing. It was a life-changing event for us. And then we saw that 10,000 times more over 10 years.
Was that dry material or fresh material?
It was a test extraction we made, and we just went over to the local Walmart and got 25 bags, 50-pound bags of black sunflower seeds that you feed to birds on the lawn.
And you just extracted the whole seed, like hull and all?
Yeah, so that's living seed, because those are still alive, correct?
Yeah, it was a living seed. And no, we ground them up, Mark. We have a big grinder there that we brought from a macaroni factory in Italy, and we use that. It grinds up old macaroni. Pretty much it grinds up anything you throw into it. But yeah, we ground it up and extracted it. And yeah, we didn't want to try to extract the seed through the hull. That didn't make much sense at the moment, to me anyway. So yeah, we ground it up. As far as hulls go, we changed some information in the books about seed oil extraction, because a lot of people extract seed by crushing or putting them in solvent, but they do it hulls and all. And so there's a fair amount of tannins that come from the hulls. And I know this to be true because we've extracted just hulls to see what was in there. And it was a lot of tannins and very heavy oils. And I'm sure those were to discourage animals from eating them. But in any case, these seeds without the hulls are the best to extract because, as Mark said earlier, the seed germ in the middle stays whole and it looks like a little macadamia nut.
I've never seen anything like that. I'm telling you, like, you gotta see it. It is so trippy.
You can crunch them up. I mean, they're like little popcorn things, or you can just change them into flour by tossing them in a grinder.
Mm-hmm.
And really, a friend of mine was over when I made that 5-gallon bucket, Mark, and they made a pancake out of some of the isolate and fried it in the oil, and it was quite tasty.
Interesting. Well, I look forward to the day where you're producing hemp oil for at least North America, maybe some of Europe. It would be a nice option, just an option, you know. I don't think it's going to replace the entire marketplace, but it's certainly a higher level. You never can tell.
But hey, that might be a good lever to get your ass in the States. You're going to come over here and we're going to participate in a hemp seed oil thing, which we're going to proliferate around to all the states and build one big giant hemp seed oil extraction plant per state.
I love the idea, but man, if I can't somehow get this going in Canada, the country that I live in and the country that I was involved in the hemp industry from the beginning, I'm going to just bang my head against the wall. I'm literally going to do it myself and just be like, why does no one want this oil? Like, why are these companies terrified? Because they've got these investments in cold pressing. They've got these investments in this other extraction process that they use that they never talk about, but it's a water extraction process. It's like a multi-million-dollar machine that blows the fucking particulate into the, I don't even know how it works. Have you seen the machine, Anndrea?
Yeah, no, I've never seen it. I've always had thankfully, I've always left some of that proprietary stuff. I always chose not to see because however, but yes, absolutely. There's other methods out there. This is, I'm very interested. I've got lots of little notes here. So I think we'll have to think about those types of applications. And I think this is really where we're at in the hemp industry, is that these kind of crossover ideas or people with knowledge bringing it forward and actually now having the ability because of the legal framework for however, even though it blows, to actually be able to come forward and do this work and prove that work, whether that be by being repeatability, which can become the science part that Natasha was talking about, right? And being able to tie all those pieces back in. And, talking about research, I'm reading 3 papers right now. So if y'all want to know a couple of papers that I'm reading, paper in food chemistry, this was just published. It's the relationship between cannabinoid content and the composition of fatty acids in hemp seed oils. I've just started that paper. And then another one, which will be interesting. I think we're talking about what we have to do, is a paper called The Evaluation of 11 Industrial Hemp Cultivars Grown in Eastern Canada. So the stuff that, Clint is doing in Tennessee, talking about variety trials, we're still doing it in Canada because we don't have a lot of cultivation going on in Quebec or in the East. So we're now needing to take those varieties that have become stable in the Canadian prairies and take them east and south and, in other parts of the hemisphere. And the last paper, albeit a little bit older, from 2014, but these are all still applicable today, is New Developments in Fiber Hemp Breeding. So those are just a couple of the peer-reviewed papers that I'm reading right now.
And the one, have you read the one that talks about cannabinoid content?
Yeah, the funny thing is there's a point where they just talk about CBD and THC, but then come in the conclusions, they're not including anything of that. They're just talking about the gamma-linolenic and stearidonic acid, those really long, unique, super polyunsaturated fats that are uniquely found in hemp. Okay, yes, they're in evening primrose and borage oils and maybe a few other very special oils, but no tabletop oils. So it seems
I've got a hemp variety that yields 15% stearidonic.
Excellent. Well, let's get that sucker on this Canadian proof cultivar list already.
Which one is that, Sam? What's the name of that one?
It's a variety that I got from the BIR 15 years ago. And I screened it and worked on it and developed a high oil content variety. I didn't name it.
Right.
There's so much room that has to be done in the plant breeding world, because if you look at really, taking hemp, and people want to say, oh, well, you can use hemp as a biofuel. Okay, well, yes. And if you're like, you can take hemp seed oil and use it as biodiesel. Yes. But, how do we make those programs, those breeding programs, breed for, once again, intent, breeding for intent, growing for intent, harvesting for intent, using for intent, and disposing of with intent, so that we understand where the product is moving. It's brilliant.
Anndrea, I wanted to ask, what's going on with hemp roots? Like, can we still not process that part of the plant? The reason why I'm bringing up hemp roots is there's long history of use. I'm just about to release a review paper with Ethan Russo about the history of hemp roots and also some modern applications. And so there's no cannabinoids in the hemp roots, but there's other active compounds. There's some triterpenoids called fritoline, and there's also some alkaloids that are unique to cannabis, such as cannabis sativine, but we don't know very much about these compounds at all, and we haven't been able to work with the hemp root. So cannabis root, hemp root, is there any movement on that, or do you know?
Small, albeit small. It took me over 2.5 years to finally get permission to work with hemp root. And they've kept it very constricted for me also, but there's definitely ways to be able to work within the system to get it done, to actually even sell it to an end consumer, as long as you can make sure that it's 10 parts per million less THC, but they have to have a license to possess it. So basically what I said to Health Canada is, okay, this is just crazy. I've proven all of these things, and you would be a fine point to add in there for some more further things that need to happen. But it's like, okay, so I'm going to get permission to be able to work with the producer to bring the material. I can grind it up, I can sell it, but every single person along that value chain has to have it. So now we've made it into a cream. And it's just a cream. It's got this material in it. We can show that this material is a raw ingredient derivative as per our current regulations that say that it's 10 parts per million or less THC in that batch derivative. They're going to tell me who's ever going to buy the cream has to be also licensed. And I'm like, you guys be ready, because if it ever really goes somewhere and we're actually making the hemp root cream, let's do it. I said, I want to inundate them with so many possession applications. I will fill out every single one of them, and I will give it to you. And all you got to do is sign your name and your date and submit it to Health Canada's office to kind of prove, to say, like, how ludicrous is this that you're going to make me have the person buying the lotion. But absolutely there is way. And it's something that, if you look back in all those pharmacopoeias and in a lot of Asian history, it's using those roots, those cannabis roots. So I think it's fascinating, and I have a little bit of permission to work with that, and I just need somebody who can help me push it.
Oh, I would love to help you with that. And it's like you were just saying, the history of use is fascinating, and it's all topical use. And a lot of it is for inflammatory conditions, pain conditions, and as gout. It always talks about gout. And therapies for gout target inflammation, and they also target other enzymes. And there's potential compounds in in hemp root that can do this. So I think there's a lot of potential for developing therapeutics, and a lot of different kinds of therapeutics. Like, they've used it raw, they use it. Oh, nice. Oh, and I also wanted to ask, when you're processing the hemp root, so I had connections in Dauphin, Manitoba, who were growing hemp, and let me just play with some of the hemp roots. And my husband also grows cannabis, so I've got to play with some cannabis roots. And they are so hard to work with initially, because trying to break these things up, we had a huge knife trying to crack these things up. It was almost impossible. But then we let them sit for a few years in the freezer, came back to them, and they almost were like a powder. And so we're even just kind of learning these new ways of processing. And even like Anndrea, I wanted to ask, with your technology, is there any ways to process hemp roots or things like that also?
There is. You dump it in a bowl of liquid nitrogen, and then you hit it with an aluminum bat, and it changes into powder right there on the spot. Never mind putting it in the freezer for a long period of time.
Perfect.
Yeah, I can imagine you could probably get some crazy root extract that the world has never seen. I can see it. Awkward silence.
We're all thinking of the magical hemp formulas we're going to create together.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
cheers.
I did extract some roots once upon a time using the gas extraction method, and got a very light pink oil from it. And I don't know to this day what it was. I never tried smoking it. I always just put it in a little bottle and said, hey, pink oil.
The reason I was so silent was because I can think of the hundreds or thousands of hemp roots that I burnt just so they weren't hanging around anymore.
Oh my God. Yeah, you've grown a bit of hemp, haven't you, Sam?
Well, when I said hemp root, I was being all-encompassing.
Well, there it is. Well, this, you guys were for a long time. I mean, before we kind of got involved, before we read Jack's book and stuff, I mean, you guys were really, I mean, when did the IHA start?
We started it in the maybe 1990, 92, somewhere around then. And
Right.
it was, as far as I know, yes, it was out before Jack's book. And we were deeply involved in hemp in a dozen countries before we saw Jack's book.
Yep, no, for sure. I mean, Jack's book was huge to us, but so was the IHA. I mean, having access to that information was pretty unique back then.
What I liked was we printed it on pure hemp paper.
Obviously.
And the other thing was our motto was really dedicated to the advancement of cannabis through the dissemination of information. And I still strongly believe that you have to re-educate the masses to allow, the real flowering of cannabis.
Yeah, and cannabis is slower than most things in the sense because it's got such an agenda against it that we've had to, oh, there we go, Industrial Hemp Journal, production
That's one of the new ones. What volume is that?
Oh, she's muted.
Just what I grabbed quickly, volume 10, 8, and 7.
Yep.
By the way, Natasha, just a hint for you. If you want to combine oils of any sort and powder of any sort, the way to do it is to crush the oils up under liquid nitrogen and then add the powder, stir it all up, and go sit it on the porch for an hour. And when you come back, you'll have the perfect mix of oil and powder, because the nitrogen is going to act as a solvent in this particular case. Then you can grab it out and make little cakes out of it or whatever you want to make out of it. But that'll definitely make it all combine at the molecular level. It'll be a very smooth situation.
And this is an experiment you yourself can recreate and prove.
Yes, you can go ahead and try this at home.
I might even want to be there for it.
No, that sounds cool. I'll just have to get my hands on some liquid nitrogen now and do some trial and error blending experiments. Thanks for the tips.
Are you in Canada or States?
In Canada, yeah, in Vancouver.
I heard some libraries in Canada have it available. I don't know that that's a fact because I haven't.
We have it. It's just a matter of going and ordering it. It's not as difficult. It's money. It's the cost of the container is really the only thing you have to swallow.
Yeah, I have connections through labs that I could get some also, but yeah, it's more just doing it safely. And I mean, I've worked with liquid nitrogen before. Again, you have to be very safe with it. It's not something to just play around with, but yeah.
You can use a big thermos to transport it. The only thing is, don't screw the lid on tight, because nitrogen expands 300 times its volume from liquid to gaseous state. And you want to make sure you don't give it the opportunity to build any pressure up, because it certainly will. And
They'll bring it right to your
not
table at a restaurant in Whistler and make ice cream for you. Pour it right into a stainless steel bowl out of a pitcher, and then just mix cream up. And because it's so cold, the way, I mean, didn't we talk about this, Sam? Doesn't Haagen-Dazs use a similar
no, they
method
do it under vacuum.
Oh, right, exactly. So they vacuum out everything. Well, the liquid nitrogen is
so that it can't make ice crystals.
Right. Liquid nitrogen doesn't crystallize ice crystals either in ice cream.
Well, wait a minute now, Mark. Liquid nitrogen
I'll wait a
make
minute.
ice crystals.
Not in ice cream, it doesn't.
But yes, it does. But they're 1,000 times smaller than normal ice crystals.
There you go.
And so they feel very smooth on your tongue. It feels like butter or something on your tongue.
Very smooth.
One time I tried it, and it just came out a real joke. And then I found out afterwards I was actually using nitrous oxide.
Oh my God. Yeah. I bet you that would make
only
you laugh.
joking.
Sam's humor is the best because it's always like followed by silence and then laughter. You got to sort of like, okay, what?
Well, that's because they need me to explain the joke.
Generally so.
They're time jokes is what they are. It takes time to understand them.
I want to ask the panel a question about cannabigerol, so CBG. So I've been reading about CBG. It's also good to stimulate appetite. So I've been reading about appetite stimulation types of cannabis, especially for pediatric use, so for children. And CBG is a nice alternative to THC because it's not as psychoactive in the same way THC is. But anyway, it's hard to get a high CBG type of cannabis because it's the precursor to THC and CBD. But I've read that there's some high European hemp strains that make high CBG. So does anybody know anything about that, or if that's available anywhere?
I know we developed a decade ago a variety of CBG with high CBG that was over 10% with little to none of the other cannabinoids.
I haven't seen much with CBG. I remember Tony had a product a while back. Same with CBC. It was maybe a couple years ago when he was still at River Rock, and he had these creams, these balms that were high in CBG, and another one that was high in CBC. I used it. It was pretty awesome on like sore muscles and such, but other than that, I'd never really heard cultivars high in those cannabinoids or, you know, products that have been made with them and for what purposes, like, you know.
We also bred a CBC variety, CBC only variety, which was pretty unusual because it actually produces more as juvenile rather than full tilt boogie flowering. So it's much more, so what happened is we in an Afghan variety, we found it, the CBC, and then we also used a few other varieties, and we added a variety that had what's called prolonged juvenile. So it doesn't really go into full flowering, and it produces way more CBC. But
did you concentrate? Did you concentrate any of those, like CBG or CBC concentrates?
No, I never made any extractions at all. We just were involved in the breeding of the varieties.
Natasha, there is a couple of people in Kentucky that are using CBG dominant varieties. They're doing an early harvest for the CBG dominants, but I can definitely put you in touch with them.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. Thank you. And also, I was going to ask that if you did an early harvest, would you just get more CBG? Because, like, at what point do things start turning
Not
into?
for CBG. With CBC, maybe, depending on what the genes are in it. But with CBG, what you want to do is max it out, let it get totally resonated and flowered, but only have the synthases for CBG and not for the other cannabinoids.
Very cool. Interesting. I love that, you know, someone was saying it the other day, Sam, they were just like, you know, like, and Anndrea actually, and not to like downplay anyone else on the panel because you guys are all amazing, but someone was just saying, man, isn't it an amazing thing that you've got this space that like Anndrea and Sam can just go to and share their stories and their knowledge, and because, man, you guys have been at this a long time. It's really like, I mean, so much of what I am into was inspired via what Sam's been doing. I've known of Anndrea for 17 years and paid close attention to him as well. He's been an inspiration to me, huge inspiration since he's been coming on Hash Church and talking his stories and sharing his information. I just want to take this moment right now to say thank you both.
We all stand on the shoulders of giants, and when we get old, it's time to pass the torch.
Yeah, well, you guys are our giants. So thank you for holding us for so long on your shoulders, for God's sakes. Holy Christ.
I think you bring a good point about succession planning, you know, for us in the industry, you know, and how do we share this knowledge that we've had the fortunate chance to come to us, and really passing it forward and paying it forward, and all about succession planning. Who's going to come forward, right, to inspire another Clint? Who's, you know, this year at the CHTA, I had a guy come up to me and said, I did exactly what you told me to do and it worked. And so now he's, you know, he and I was like, oh goodness, what I tell you to do. And he said he wanted to learn about hemp as a farm crop. And I said, well, go get yourself a job on a farm. And that's exactly what he did. And now he's moving to the prairies to, you know, do what he wants to do and learn about machinery and things. So, you know, but it is that ability to succession plan and pass it forward and give other people the opportunity to step forward and shine and share what they've learned.
Absolutely. No, it's a big deal too. You know, it's like, it's especially in this time where this industry is at a point where, you know, I had a young guy from New Zealand hit me up the other day. I get people hitting me up all the time and asking me, how can I get into the industry? How can I? And I kind of like have built up a bit of a tough skin and kind of like slough it all, like, oh, follow your passion, blah, 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 blah. Well, this guy was different. He hit me up and he wants to come out and get involved in the industry. And I must have spent like an hour and a half just talking to this guy, just sort of offering, you know, whatever guidance, I mean, that he felt that was of value, trying to give him good, you know, at first I'm telling, yeah, just come out and do it, you know, blah, 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 blah. Then I find out he's got a wife and a kid and he's going to leave them behind. And I'm like, no, that's your first responsibility. You got to get a real job. Then you can dip into the cannabis industry if you want. Like, trying to give this guy solid advice, but not lead him away from obviously his wife and family. I think it's kind of the least you can do is spend time with inspired young people who are looking forward to trying to get into this industry or have some questions. It's sometimes a bit of a bummer because you get so many, it ruins it for you. I was glad that I spent time with this guy talking to him. He invited me to come stay in Auckland, New Zealand anytime I'm there. And he was just a really cool dude to talk to for a short amount of time there. So it's spend time with people. Don't slough them off. That person might be the next big thing, the next, you know, that push that we'll look back at and go, oh my God, like there it was right there. Like I met that guy. I remember him or woman.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's key that we turn over our generations and hold our torch as long as we can, and then show people how to hold that torch, because it comes with a great deal of responsibility, as we all know, but one that has to be taught. And that's exciting, is because we can have future generations to talk about now, because we've changed the complete dynamic that we are actually talking about legal hemp now, not only in Canada, but in the United States. And I'm looking at, you know, an American hemp farmer here, which I never thought I would see again in my lifetime, which we were told 20 plus years ago, not in my lifetime, not in the United States. So it makes me beyond proud to see, one, that Canada led the way. So y'all held the torch thanks to the previous work of Skunk Man and everybody. And now we have that opportunity thanks to Canada showing us that it's viably economically. Otherwise, it would have never have taken hold here or even been a consideration. So thank you for proving the viability and continuing to prove that viability, so that now we can have a future industry, so that I can say, hey, look, I'm no longer eating my Manitoba hemp. I love my Manitoba hemp, don't get me wrong, but I'm having California hemp today. I would love to actually say that I have local grown hemp seed oil, and I look forward to that day.
Absolutely.
You know how long some of us have been waiting for legal cannabis? I was born in 46, and so I always considered myself waiting since April 22nd, 1946. and it just fucking happened. Excuse my French, ladies. But yeah,
that's not French.
All things come to he who waits.
No, you still got to get off your ass and do something about it.
I did. I did for 50 some odd years. I did something about it, man.
When we started the IHA around 1990, me and Rob Clark, what happened was hemp wasn't legal anywhere. You couldn't grow it in England. You couldn't grow. You had to have. You couldn't even get a license to grow it. They had to change the laws. Same thing. South Africa, Australia. We supplied seeds to all of these countries legally with import permits from their governments and phytosanitary certificates, et cetera, et cetera. But we sent out dozens of varieties to anybody who requested them and paid for the shipping. And yeah, it changed the world, but it was not immediate. It took time. And what we see now is 25 years later.
Yeah, I got to even give a shout out, and this is the craziest shout out you will ever hear on behalf of hemp. But this is how it worked for us in Manitoba. We went to the Cannabis Cup, the High Times Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam, thinking, yeah, man, we're going to fucking show up. We're the hemp guys. We got all this hemp stuff. And this other dude by the name of John Stahl came from the Ukraine. He was an expat living in the Ukraine. And he was friends with Goro Borodko from the Institute of Bast Fiber and the Ukrainian farmer, Sasha, and all these guys. And he was like, I'm going to go to this cannabis festival. It's going to be like, I'm going to do good hemp business at this cannabis festival. Well, he goes to this cannabis festival. And man, let me tell you, he is let down. He is not meeting the people he thought he was coming to meet. It's like the full-blown Cannabis Cup in the 90s. I mean, it's like Skunk Van Sam walking around in Birkenstocks, just blazing full melt dry sift. Like the whole thing was just full-blown madness. But we met each other at that event, and it was through him that we gained. What's that, Sam?
But John did come over to the IHA because we had a museum and a big giant hemp collection of stuff.
Yep.
So
yeah, no, he loved that. He just was a little. He didn't think the event was what he thought the event was. Do you understand? He thought he was going to like a hemp conference, and he ended up at the and he ended up at the PAX party house at the Cannabis Cup. It was hilarious. But he's how we got in. He was our introduction to the Institute of Bast Fibers. He was our introduction. We flew Goro Borodko and that farmer Sasha and another dude from the Ukraine with John to Manitoba, cut the ribbon, planted the seed. Like it was a pretty big deal in our history, man. Like I'm telling you, I wanted to find the pictures of us all standing as looking like children in front of our hemp store that we called the Manitoba Hemp Exchange. That was the hemp store that we opened in 1992. Or 93, and we had it open for a little bit before we decided we were going to go full blown. Okay, we're not selling pipes, we're not selling High Times, we're not selling anything cannabis related. We need to get like old farmers comfortable coming into our store, and then we can bring seed in and sell it to them. So this is how it all kind of started for us, and it was the Cannabis Cup, you know, hemp in Manitoba.
Absolutely, you know, and since then, like boy, you know, what hemp's doing in the building industry is also another great topic that is an economy of scale and can impact us all, and especially now that we've got, you know, mandates being put in for remodeling and green building and just talking about total crop utilization. We're right now building some units down in Mexico, so to watch them, you know, it kind of semi a little bit off the grid build and just slap these buildings up, and these guys, after seeing them, and they love it because they're not having to carry buckets of concrete. They're carrying this light fluffy material. So pretty phenomenal to see what's happening in the hempcrete industry around the world.
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, when we were trying to get all this happening in the 90s, the real interest for me was that it had 50,000 commercial uses, that there were so many different uses that it would explode. And the fact that it, you know, not saying that hemp oil is a bad thing, that's an amazing thing. And I'm sure that the health of people, like regular people eat hemp oil. I see it all the time in their fridges, hemp seed hulls, dehulled embryos. Like it's an incredible thing. Hemp hearts, people are eating these products and they were not eating them before. But, and it's a big but, it's kind of like, oh, very nice. It's kind of like the oil thing, where even when prohibition dropped out and medical cannabis became a thing and the price of pounds went down, oil brought the price back up. You were able to get that prohibition-based dollar off of oil. And it's the same thing in the hemp industry. Yeah, we know there's 50,000 commercial products, but we are selling a liter of oil for $16. Can you imagine? So there's a real value to this oil, to the point where people are like, we need to burn it in our engines. And people are like, are you fucking kidding me? Gas is only $1 a liter. This hemp oil is like $15 to $20 a liter, $10 to $15 a liter for some of it. So it's fairly expensive stuff in that sense. It would be nice to see us growing hemp for many, many, many more purposes, like building Hempcrete, building composite. You know, I'm down with all the products.
Oh, and you know, right now contracting pricing, if you look at, you know, in the beginning of the call, we started talking about the show, we started talking about some of the pricing going in, the yields coming out, but contracting right now for conventional grain is somewhere between that 75 cents to 90 cents a pound, clean, dry weight on the grain. And then looking at organic, it's upward even of $1.75 plus clean per pound clean dry weight from the producer. So, you know, if you're talking about the hauled hemp and you're taking, let's just say for ease of numbers, 3 pounds of grain going in and it's organic and your contract down at $1.75 a pound, you already have quite an initial cost coming into manufacturing this product. And that's driving the price. So it'll be interesting. So different extraction methods is going to be in derivative acceptance and opening up the mind to what is a derivative from this plant and how can we use the products that are co-products that now we're having to basically destroy somehow, like hulls, for instance.
You know, that was what I was going to ask about, Anndrea, and hello, Anndrea. It was about the fact that, you know, when are we going to start seeing hemp clothes and hemp paper coming out of Canada or the hemp industry? Obviously, the seeds were the first to spool up because it was a natural byproduct of the growing. But when will we see full utilization? And are there steps that are happening to lead us into that direction?
Yeah, I was just coming from the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance conference, and welcome, Todd. Great to see you, man. And you know, there's a company out of Quebec that's going to be producing some hemp. They're finally at the hemp thread, and I'm walking around. I'm like, hey guys, tell me what's going on with your textile work? And they're like, oh, well, you know about us? And I said, absolutely. Are you kidding? You guys have been at it for years now, and now they're finally going to be producing a thread. They're one of the members of the CHTA. So we'll start to see those things, but still no large scale decortication facilities here. And that really, to me, is still like, I just can't believe that we've been like, I feel like we've been carrying this bale around with us and beating it all across the Canadian prairies, just trying to get one processing facility, commercial scale processing facility, when they're turnkey. And our colleagues in the EU are wanting to help us develop that. We've got some expertise already here. But no, there's not anybody who's like broke ground to lay down the concrete to actually build the thing, right? We are seeing some of the municipalities in Alberta coming together to try to join some monies together to potentially build something. We have, even though we're growing shorter stature cultivars, there's still enough fiber left over to feed into even non-wovens and truly industrial. If we look at textile, and you know, some of the textile expertise that we have on the show today can tell you that, you know, it's also about the cultivation practices and the harvesting practices that are put into that. And now with all the new technology for textile production, but unfortunately, we have no mechanism to get the bast fiber off of the herd on a large scale. So until that time comes.
It's not only just Canada. I mean, they don't have facilities. They're not building new facilities in Europe either, or in Asia. I mean, the truth of it is they're either remodeling old facilities or they're dismantling. I mean, the Hungarian industry was completely dismantled over the last 20 years.
I bet there's a rebirth happening in those places. And that's, I think, very interesting. Also, that institutional knowledge is coming back. You have, you know, going through like the European Industrial Hemp Association, they've got their conference coming up in June, you know, to see those factories being brought back online. But absolutely, there's a need for it, and the mechanisms and the cultivars are out there to be able to grow and harvest it, but it's just getting it to the point. So Todd, I don't know, any day now anybody could feel, somebody comes to me and says, oh, I've got, you see all the money going into the medical marijuana, and I'm just like, man, somebody just come and gift towards us. What some of these medical marijuana facilities, 30 million, 15 million dollars, even 7.
Yeah, but an industrial facility costs hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, let's be honest. I'm from Louisiana originally, so I was surrounded by sugarcane fields. Sugarcane is a long, strong fiber plant that grows almost 20 feet high. And I actually looked at, when I was working for Ecolution, what it would cost to retool those large processing industrial machines, because we don't even make this type of industrial machines anymore. And the reality is, when we're dealing with hemp, unless we cottonize it, which means breaking it down to small fibers and using conventional cotton machines like they do in China, whereas in Eastern Europe, we were using very old canvas making machines that could actually weave and deal with that. But to even find machines like that is near impossible. But then you need hundreds of millions of dollars just to build one facility, and it has to be regionally centralized. Whereas I learned that with the sugarcane fields there in Louisiana, the manufacturers are out there in certain regions centralized to the actual farming, but there has to be millions of hectares or acres growing to make that a reality. So it's kind of odd that you need the dichotomy to have the certain amount of acreage growing now to have the machinery manufactured to be there, unless you're going to unless you're going to pay for specialized machinery like Gardella out of Italy, which makes very fine hemp, which is actually decorticated as soon as it's actually cut. So it's actually done green, whereas opposed to water retted or dry retted.
Lynn and Pichio makes some machinery that can be used with dry fiber.
Well, let me add this to that whole thing, something that nobody's really taken a look at, except for I have a little bit. You can take the part of the hemp plant that produces all these lignins and fibers, and guess what? Dunk it in a vat of liquid nitrogen, smash it up quite fine. And I have a friend of mine who's working on making a fiber, or spinning a fiber from the results of smashing it up under liquid nitrogen. And I know that they made all these machines 100 years ago and 200 years ago, but my question is, why take a giant step backwards when we can take a couple of smaller steps forward?
Because you like to think outside the box.
John, is long fiber is superior to short fiber.
Less wear and tear. We found
that. It boils
that
down to exposure and how long you expose it to it and how much you crush it up. I mean, it's a process. It's not just one of these things where it's all one way or all another way. It's a controllable process, and you can make long fibers.
Yes, but we have to start somewhere, and so that's what I'm saying is you can get to the more finer thing, but we have to find a basis to start. We can't start with these utopian ideas. I agree, it should be that way.
Utopian. However, it works.
I understand that, but it doesn't work in the industrial application. It doesn't work currently.
Well, I mean, it's not being used currently because they're still practicing 100-year-old methods.
That's because those methods work, and those methodologies work in smaller areas, such as over in Eastern Europe, we did water retting. We couldn't field ret it. If you field ret it, the hemp actually turns gray. Whereas if you soak it in the water, it comes out golden. So by actually harvesting it green, you can make a golden fiber without the decortication process. So these are just industrial ways that have gotten us to the point where we could actually start to get to what Todd was saying. When do I start to get my hemp shirts? When can I actually start purchasing these things? Because we've been purchasing hemp seed oil for quite a while, and I'm dying to see manufacturing on a level that they're actually spooling and actually pumping out bolts so that people are producing, or just producing twine in itself. One of the biggest things Ecolution sold was twine by the container load, and it doesn't take much to actually get to that industrially. But yes, the methodology is old, but it would therefore get product to market currently where there is no product there.
And for twine, you definitely want long fiber.
Yeah. Well, I could just picture that process with nice long stalks injecting the liquid nitrogen into just the the herds on the inside, and then just breaking it up and having the outside fibers still maintain, not break up into small little particulars. Just an idea, but I agree with both of you.
Right.
You got to start somewhere. Or
that,
you could just both cut me off too.
You can actually just spray it, a light spray on the outside of it, and
there you go.
It breaks the thing. You can take it, once you've done that, you can twist it in your hands with a set of gloves on, and it shatters like fiberglass, long strands of it. And anyway, I know that these are thoughts that are like unintenable because they're utopian ideas, and they're not, the way it always starts is people laugh at you first. And they say it's not going to work, and then
Anndrea, not saying they're laughing at you, just saying that the opportunity is that we had to start somewhere. It's like when we started originally with processing in the East, people were just crushing the herds and making it into paper because it was simple. It was something that can be done in the rural areas. Not everybody has liquid nitrogen or access to it.
I don't think
but they can buy 200-year-old machines and import them from another country.
Right.
I mean, come on. The excuses that you're offering up are they're not. They're making my brain itch.
It's not excuses, in my opinion, it's so much as it's what they can sell. Because I'm going to ask Anndrea right now, what's the breakdown of the Canadian market? What percentage of the hemp growing in Canada is supplying Whole Foods with hemp seeds and hemp oil and health food products?
Really, 95% of all of the acreage grown in Canada is grown for grain production. There is a small that's been dedicated for fiber, and then maybe some what would be classified as dual, so that there is, industrial grade fiber left over. And also we're now seeing a larger increase of Chinese cultivated hemp food products on the North American market. So those are coming in as finished products. I just shared a post here for some YouTube videos. I had the opportunity to go to China this past year with Hoodlum, and then continued on my own journey afterwards. And they put together some nice videos out there, and you can have a peek see where Hoodlums are coming from. And
was that with Doug?
That was with Doug. I got to spend 5 days with Doug, and then I spent a total of 22 days over there, and then went and saw other things outside of just what Hoodlum was happening. So it was really good to get a perspective about where my clothes come from and where I made that choice, thankfully, years ago, to try to buy clothes with a conscience and feel good about that. And of course, Hoodlum is a great guy. Nice hat, by the way, Hoodlum shirt. Always making us comfortable, for sure. But, I think we have to talk about economies of scale, because if we look at it, where are those pieces of equipment? How can we harvest this material? How can we deal with this material? How can we move this material? Looking at the Canadian landscape, we're not talking about one fiber decortication facility, Todd. We're talking about maybe multiple in one province. Go ahead, Todd.
Well, my question is don't you think the next commodity that's going to start taking percentage points in your overall spectrum of profitability of a hemp field is going to be CBD, which is what you were talking about earlier? Because who would have thought hemp as a drug plant, but it looks like, and is that, not now another possibility? Because we're going to see CBD extraction before we're going to see hemp genes and hemp paper and stationery, but those will come down the road, I believe. Am I correct?
I think also, talking about, the classification that these things come in. Okay, so we can go out and we can buy essential fatty acid pills. And Natasha, you'll probably have some things to pipe in for and discuss. So basically, we can go to the store and we can buy a Natural Health Products Directorate that is a supplement for essential fatty acids, but I can also go to the doctor and get a medical prescription of essential fatty acids, a higher doses of vitamin D, other that I can't buy on the store shelf. So if we look in Canada, how can we position ourselves to maybe think about these types of phytocannabinoids being considered a Natural Health Products Directorate? But I can also go and buy medical grade dosages of them. So it's interesting how that's going to play out for us. And we're not quite sure. Todd, earlier on in the show, I was talking about the new regulations that have come out for Health Canada. And actually on the application, you have to tick it. And I do believe you may have to put your initials, that it states that you are not harvesting any of the flowering parts of the plant or intended for that kind of extraction. So they're well aware that it's happening. They're trying to prevent it, but it's going to be interesting if, what happens. Go ahead.
Well, my question is then immediately is, can they inhibit a legitimate market? Because, I remember when Oprah Winfrey got sued because she said, I won't eat beef anymore. And believe it or not, the beef industry sued her for what was called beef libel laws. And are they not, is there any veggie libel laws that the Hemp Industries Association could go after because they're libeling our legal commodity and limiting the scope of usability?
Not yet, but we can work towards that end, no doubt.
I think there are though, John, because there are these, believe it or not, beef libel laws, and there are libel laws against agricultural products, and believe that's what they sued Oprah under in Texas, because she had this guy Howard Lyman on, who was like a fifth generation that went vegan and wrote a book called Mad Cowboy. Howard's a really cool guy, and when he was being interviewed on our show and he was laying out all this factual information, she made the comment, I'm never going to eat beef again. And the beef industry sued her, saying that she was so influential that she was hurting their market. And that's where I first understood and learned about beef libel laws. And my immediate brain went, whoa, I wonder if this exists for corn, because corn is huge too.
So somebody's going to come out with the liquid nitrogen-based harvester.
In time, I think a lot of different harvesters will come out. But, first you're going to have to find your markets for all of these different things.
Welcome back, Anndrea. You got bumped out?
Yeah, my battery died.
Yes, the battery died. All right, well, hopefully the phone will work.
Absolutely, Todd, but I think those things, it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with the Canadian regulations and where we're at the end of the day when it comes to extraction. I mean, right, we can't even make essential oil.
Well, where my question was going is because you're still the president of HIA, right?
No, I'm no longer the president of the HIA. I'm a board member, but I am the newly appointed vice president of the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance. But I do sit on both of the boards.
I know. It seems like just yesterday you were becoming the president of the HIA. Wasn't that long ago, was it? But my question is are they going to take a position now on the manufacture of CBD as another one of their legal rights?
Yeah, absolutely. Those things are happening. I mean, it's also happening in Mexico, and now it's talking about human rights. I think we bring up this, interesting point: civil rights, human rights, and where does this all lie with us? Absolutely, they are taking a stand. They are supporting that, and we tried for such a long time in the industry to keep ourselves separate from what was happening on that portion. Let's just say on the flower portion, the flower production portion. And there's been such a crossover, and we've seen such legitimate change and both of the industries really coming together that basically the hemp industry just had to get on board with flower extraction and understand that we're talking about what defines industrial hemp by law is 0.3% THC. And then now it's about cultivation for intent. So absolutely.
Well, hopefully you're going to be challenging the THC laws in time as well, because I think that we should be talking about the end products and how we use the plant and not about the chemicals and the fact that we're not harvesting. Because obviously high THC is now legal to grow in places like California. So why not mid THC hemp if that's the best hemp for the climate?
Agreed. D420K has been just making the medicine the whole time we've all been talking about hemp. He's collecting heads on the edge of his DVD. collecting them with his little brush.
Yeah, I've been patiently waiting him to do a call for a bong rip terp dip.
Bong rip, everybody. Let's fucking do this. Come on.
Well,
very interesting conversations, man. I'm telling you. Fuck, I love listening to you guys. And instead of just sitting around and waiting for a bong rip call, I figured I'd get busy today because it's just that's time. So yeah, it's been fucking great. You guys are. I could listen all day, man. And this is like instead of listening to Slayer, I'm listening to you guys.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with Slayer either.
Oh no, but I'm gonna mute myself. You guys carry on and bong rip, mother lovers.
Right on, D420K. Good vibes in the house.
So, D, I have to ask you, what are you sifting over there?
Little OG Kush.
The OG Kush, yeah, you betcha. Good old Kush. And I'm taking it right now. I've cleaned up a bunch of piles, then I took the piles and now I'm re-cleaning it just to make it cleaner.
Always a good idea. Well, something finished downloading. I'm not sure what it was, but yeah.
By the way, thanks for steering me over to the proper, finally, piece of glass to do dabs in. I finally got a regular piece of glass and a dabbing instrument and a torch.
Excellent.
And I'm doing it the way Tony showed me now. And
that's awesome.
I love it.
Hey, I got a question for James whenever he comes back. James, so how are the cops interacting with the hemp fields and stuff that's going on there?
So far, so good. I mean, everybody knows what's going on. The TBI is aware, our Bureau of Investigation. They also let all the local county sheriffs know. So the only instance that we've had is we're required to put in our GPS coordinates on each field, and someone didn't put their GPS coordinates in on a field and actually had one of the State Highway Patrol eradication units land, and it wasn't too big of an issue. Obviously, they were able to supply them with their permits, but you know, it's an issue going forward. Our Department of Ag is actually going to include some rules and regs that kind of slap the hand of people that do that, because you should be required. You know, law enforcement shouldn't stop and have to do that. But besides that, there's only been one other instance of one of the farmers who was actually leaving his field at harvest and got pulled over, and the cop tried to get him for driving while intoxicated because of his smell, which he took to court, and that was actually in Franklin, Tennessee. And he supplied the judge with his permit, and the judge threw the case out. So other than that, there hasn't been a lot of issues. There's always going to be somebody trying to do some shenanigans, but we haven't had too much of an issue of that yet.
What's your THC limit?
0.3. University level, I'm allowed to work at 0.6. But for everybody that's farming, it's 0.3.
Is there any chance that you can address that and, you know, work on showing them the ridiculousness of the low THC levels?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big course in education for all.
Dab them out. Just be like, look, this is super shitty, like low T. Okay, now I'm going to dab you out with some really great dabs. Okay.
Supply them with some really good, CBD dabs that are, bring them some terp dip with it,
Well, I almost see it like this. It's like when you're trying to get into a party with your friends and you get one friend in, you've got CBD in, and now you're trying to be like, oh, his best friend, his sister's cousin is really cool too. And you just got to explain who THC is, and
right. We'll go to
CBD with that in no time
mild psychoactive effect, and then we'll start talking THC with them.
Hey, Todd,
it's only psychoactive if you heat it up.
But it's the same exact immigration policy that this country uses too, by the way.
There is one state in the U.S., Virginia, and I think maybe one other one that did a 1% on the state level. I think it is Colorado also, perhaps, that did a 1% on the state level. Australia is also 1% on the THC. It falls underneath their Poisons Act. So, Ernie Small, which will have a new book coming out, it's just everybody look. He's also a succession planning, and the way he's succession planning is sharing his knowledge of cannabis in general, Mr. Ernie Small, which is the one that really is the one that put the 0.3% THC really on the mark. And, he even says it makes no sense. So absolutely working to do that. Everybody, I have to sign off for the day. Thanks, Hash Church, and all you Hash Church goers. It's been fun. I hope to come back on and talk more.
Yes, thank
Nice to
you
meet
so
you,
much
Anndrea.
Thanks for coming out. Absolutely. We'll
Thank
be
you.
having you on again.
Keep up the
Hemp
great work.
hooray! Hemp hooray!
Right on.
Nice to meet you, Anndrea.
Yep. Talk to y'all later. Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Well, that was wonderful amounts of information that Anndrea was sharing there with us. It felt good to talk about hemp. I'm not going to lie. It feels good to wear hemp. It's always, it's just a great plant that we love. It's great to be able to eat it for health purposes. It's great to be able to smoke it for health purposes and joy and all the other
It's
wonderful
also
reasons.
a significant part of the reintroduction of cannabis into the community of everyone. Because,
Huge.
People seeing hemp seed products at Costco, which is this big, giant mega store, I think it normalizes cannabis in a way that even really square people who don't smoke cannabis look at it, start to look at it and question. And that's what we need, just people to question.
She's the
Right.
proverbial foot in the door.
It definitely helped, but medical's what busted the door open.
For sure. Well, hey, and give it up to, what was her name there? Anita Roddick. Didn't she found the Body Shop? Wasn't it her that said, I'm going to put a pot leaf in every mall in America? And then just proceeded to put a giant pot leaf as her advertisement for the Body Shop in like every mall that she was in. I thought that was pretty cool. Like subtle, but pretty powerful nonetheless.
She was inspired by Jack's book, and she actually put up the money to make the documentary The Emperor of Hemp about Jack Terror. That was further paid for it. Yeah. Really great woman. Sadly, she got cancer and passed away.
I know, that's too bad.
She wrote a fantastic book called Business as Unusual, and I highly recommend everybody check it out. And she talks a great deal about her marketing campaign and the reintroduction of cannabis into society.
Very cool. Nice knowledge drop, Todd. Thank you. You're showing up a little late today, but we're happy that you showed up nonetheless.
Guys, I'm going to jump off. I really appreciate y'all having me on. I respect each one of you very much. Thanks so much for having me on, Marcus. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming and sharing your knowledge with us, dude. We'll be in touch for sure.
Thank you, Clint, and keep up the great work. And we look forward to seeing that Tennessee hemp this in 2017.
Yeah. Should have a industrial hemp production publication out sometime in the next month as well. So
we look forward to it.
Hell yeah. And loved talking about hemp today. It was great conversation. I like to see the excitement in both Clint and Anndrea in the projects that they're involved in. It's I've been away from that for a while. That's nice to see.
Yeah, I think it kind of warms all our hearts because we were all kind of into the hemp and being hempies, and when we're out pushing Jack's book, and the great thing that book did is it showed us that there was beyond smoking to it, and that there were these industrial applications, and we had hemp products, and we had this museum of things that we could show people to say, hey, this isn't just about getting high. This is these whole other aspects, and it enriched our lives in a way that we were wearing hemp clothes all the time. I was married on stage in a full hemp suit. Todd, I think you were all in 100% hemp as well. And it was just, I'm glad to see that the excitement's there because the production is there, because farmers are there, because we're no longer talking about if and when. It's happening, and when do I get my North American made this or that product? That's an amazing discussion change, but still shows you how far these next generations have to go, and picking up that torch. And we we need factories. So we need people to find investors to build these factories in regions so that we can start to have ideas of these products. Because we know there's 50,000 products that can be made from hemp. We know it from the cellulosic, from the lignostic plastics, from, the herd to the seed, to the food, to the fuel. I mean, it's deciding what is more important. And that's where it was fascinating to get their viewpoints about, okay, you've been these neophytes, now you're the elders. So where should, people start? Where should they go? Where should we grow? Because now the opportunities are starting. It takes these farmers who've now been growing these other industrial crops. Now these farmers are going to start to go, hey, I've heard about this industrial hemp. So now I need to find out, where do I get these seeds? And so this whole discussion is ongoing currently, that is going to change exponentially in the next, decade. So it's exciting be along to be along with it.
Those guys served as our proverbial foot in the door, and they deserve a pat on the back, because if those guys hadn't kept their nose at the grindstone as long as they did, we might not all be as far along as we are now.
And they fought the regulators and regulations and the EU seed and all these things that none of the farmers in the 30s and before ever had to deal with any of this type of regulation or stymization, that you can only grow a test plot to find out if it's going to grow. There was none of that. It was, how many hectares do you have, and how much tonnage of seed do you need to actually produce it? And it wasn't confined to these different manipulations. So we found, and I think, Sam, you can back me up on this, is that the EU seed, which is the 0.04% or 0.03% seed, is less, it is inferior to other higher THC applications for hemp industrially, be it from seed production or from fiber production, even from herd production. We found, I saw studies early on, they may have actually been your studies, Sam, that showed that the EUC happened to yield less in all those categories. But that has become our jumping off point, is to start off with this inferior strain to finally build up to, and we have to prove all of these hemp beliefs that we've been taught with this lower yield, lower producing seed. So it's a challenge. And again, as you were saying, Anndrea, it's definitely a tip of the hat to those that have been the giants that we're standing on their shoulders of, because they've had to bear the brunt of all this regulation that would run 99.99% of everybody away, but they stuck it out to a point where they're proving it regardless through causality.
Speaking of all this regulation, what do you think is going to happen here in the USA if that little Alabama jackass who says good people don't smoke pot gets put in as the attorney general and tries to hammer down on everything like it looks like he might anyway?
Well, though, John, in all honesty, the DEA is responsible for single percentages of arrests in any state that you look at statistically. So they have to rely on the cooperation of local law enforcement in order to, for what you and I grew up and saw, the 80s and 90s was a drug menace, but there was huge coordination between state and federal officials, which doesn't exist now because of the huge Grand Canyon sized rift in the laws between state and federal, and also the fact that a lot of the local cops didn't sign up for that. They don't want to be drug police. They want to help the community. They want to protect people in ways that don't harass them. And the feds do not have the capability of arresting people, bringing them in front of jurors who are selected from voters in that state, and convincing them that federal law trumps state law. I mean, and
excuse me, but
them losing is what the reason why we're not seeing people like Steve D'Angelo and even ATN raided and prosecuted like old school style, which is, cut the head off of the beast. They go in and try to take the property because they don't want to try to bring someone like Steve D'Angelo into a federal trial in San Francisco and lose.
Yeah, I know, but this little jackass from Alabama, he said that he thought the KKK was actually a
Hold
good
on,
organization
Hold on.
until he found out that they smoked pot.
Hold on, John. Don't turn this into me trying to defend this Republican. I'm not doing that. I'm saying that the Republicans, no matter who they are, the Democrats or the Republicans, are in a quagmire because they have to deal with the same bureaucracy. There are steps they have to go through. If they come and arrest you, they're going to have to bring you down. This is what has to happen. And now it's problematic. In the 90s, it was different. And now it is very different because now you have state rights. You have the problem of majority of voters voting this in. And if they get 5 out of 10 jurors that say John's okay for doing extractions, they lose. And they don't want to lose. So the reason they don't want to lose is now they're going after inanimate objects instead of people. You know, it'd be like taking my house instead of arresting me for growing the weed.
Well, what's going to happen when he decides to start that program up again? You know, he's
well, we don't really know that. See, this is what we're trying to find out now, and this is the reality of the transition. Is nobody in the political scene has inroads, and everybody's trying to find inroads so that they can find out what the actual direction is. Is Sessions going to follow his own directive, or is Trump going to say, follow my guidelines, concentrate on this, don't concentrate on this? We don't know. It is a complete unknown. And I agree. It's a frustration greatly, Anndrea, is that we have no idea what we're preparing for. Are we preparing for war? Are we preparing for
secession?
No, there's no such thing as secession.
His name is Sessions. Come on, man. I was just trying to crack it.
I know, but this is real. I mean, this is.
But it is also a joke
on the line because it was 2 states. Now it was 4 states. Now
it'll be the United States of Cannabis and Dumbfuckistan. Those will be the two states, right?
You mean
no.
going to move here?
Everybody's going to move to Dumbfuckistan because they can sell their weed for more there.
It's true. It's true. You'll get way higher dollar there.
But it just shows that we are a force now. We're now over 25 medical states. So if it was just 1 or 2 states, I think it would be more of a concern.
And can I bring
this up? But we don't know. That's the thing is we have no idea.
The reality is statistically they're greedy fucks, and we have that on our side because we've been, cannabis has been generating huge numbers. I mean, let me, as an example, I'm not sure what that is. As an example, the Marijuana Task Force in California between 2002 and 2012 seized $181 million worth of property from cannabis-related cases. Now, that's only 18% of what they could be taking in every 12 months from taxing us. 10 years worth of work stealing our shit, or 1/4 worth of taxing us. I think that any Republican who's conservative and fiscally minded is going to look at and take the latter. Say, tax the shit out of them.
Well, here's the reality is that California now realizes that because of 64, they no longer have to pay sales tax. And right now, the state Senate and legislature is looking at coming into session when they do in January and looking at continuing the taxation on medical patients because they're looking at the loss of revenue that is falling between the November election and the implementation of legalization for adult use in January 1st, 2018. So we currently have a legislature realizing that they've been taxing patients, and now that they realize they've been taxing patients, they now have to go lobby to tax patients until recreational comes online.
Well, isn't that amazing that the politicians have yet come up with another way of coming between us and reality using the so-called rules once again? I've never seen anything change as often as fast as the rules around medical marijuana in my life. I've seen a lot of things change fast. I mean, I've been in war. I've been in some crashes. I was in a helicopter that crashed. None of it happened as fast as the rule changes happen around this.
Now,
And
you
it's
want-
all
can I-
and it's
can I say
all
this
the
though, Tom?
politicians being willing to meet at midnight for a special session to discuss how to make taxes on marijuana, because they're all of a sudden not going to get some taxes from somewhere else. And
Hold on.
they
Can
don't
I
meet
say
they don't
something?
meet to discuss how to feed the poor or what about the homeless.
Well,
None of that stuff. But
social
they'll meet at
injustice
midnight
aside,
about pot tax.
my point is, you know what I was going to say, John, is that in my perspective, nothing's really changed. It's all been civil disobedience, because I mean, I got my first medical script from my first doctor's visit in the Netherlands in November of '94. And cannabis is still a Schedule I drug. I still can't travel internationally in and out of America with it. I'm still dealing with the same stupidities in DC I was dealing with 20 plus years ago. And you know what? The states have changed, and that's been a frustrating, slow process for me watching. I mean, in the 20 years since cannabis has been legal in this state, I've gone through 4 prosecutions and spent 5 of the 20 years in a prison cell. So it hasn't been the smoothest ride for some of us. And I only represent one of many, because a lot of people have been dragged through the muck with this new legalization. So to me, we don't have the shit for the change we need, to be honest.
No,
we're still fighting the ignorant bastards.
I get
in
you, but
DC.
you're talking about civil disobedience, and
That's what got us here.
what I'm complaining about is civil obedience, because I think we do too much of that, far too much civil obedience.
Well, in a way, though, you should be proud of your community, because you know what, you and me and others are people on this panel are all examples of people that have not at all followed a path of civil obedience. We have, you know, we've been civilly disobedient in the right areas, and we've been the ones that have pushed the agenda, so that now we have this, you know, we're evolving freedom, you know, that we're still really trying to define and expand. I mean, this is an ongoing conversation until everybody in the room understands what we're talking about, which is one of the reasons I sit and talk to you on Sundays, because the more people who understand this, the better the community is going to be accepted by the people that are just tuning in.
Well, if you guys aren't appropriately upset at just the conversation you're having right now, how about the article on the Purdue-backed LP emblem in the Globe and Mail yesterday? Did you guys see that? You know Purdue, the family Purdue, the OxyContin people? They've invested in a cannabis LP in Canada.
Whoa.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes perfect sense. All the people who have a lot of money are going to start investing in it, because they've decided to change the rules to make it okay to invest and have marijuana, as long as it starts off with the rich folks first.
Well, they want the risk gone, and if the risk's gone, they're going to play. I mean, that's the reality, and that's one reason why we've all kind of been outliers, is because we've broken the law, because we've seen the injustice of the law and have felt that, well, you know, unjust laws shouldn't be followed, so let's show them how it should be done.
Isn't that the natural way of all major industries? The bankers and the lawyers end up with the majority of it.
I don't know. Look at the beer industry. A lot of people have, you know, I live in California. You see family-owned wine. I mean, it's not, I don't know. I mean, I think there's going to be corporate cannabis, and there's going to be, you know, community cannabis. I mean, the beauty of cannabis is you can't take it away from me. I could grow it under prohibition, and I could certainly grow it under legalization. And I prefer what I grow myself anyway, so everybody else can have a nice day. So, you know, that's just how I feel about it. And the more we get to freedom, I'm not afraid of corporate broccoli. I don't care if Big Bear makes, you know, I don't care, because we still have access to it like we did before, except now they're not going to come, put a gun to our head, steal our stuff, and lock us away.
Yeah, well, I agree with everything you're saying, but I also think that most Americans want to buy their cannabis at the 7-Eleven, along with beer, potato chips, and ice cream.
Or back in Louisiana, you could pick up a fifth of alcohol right behind the counter at your 7-Eleven too.
Do we all not agree that cannabis in every convenience store would not make the world a better place?
Well, the way we get the alcohol industry on our side is allow them to attach an ounce of good pot to each bottle of whiskey that they sell, and then they'll stop campaigning against us. And if the prison food industry, who is one of the largest contributors towards illegalizing marijuana, It is amazing the people that are out there who are behind keeping it illegal so they can keep the jail scenario going on. And the prison
There's
food
a
industry.
recent study, John, that shows that after you smoke a joint, prison food tastes twice as good. So they're definitely going to be in favor of it in the long run.
Well, of course. I mean, if you think monosodium glutamate was a big thing, that when the Chinese started adding it to food, when you start serving a couple of joints with each plate of food, that's when the restaurant business is going to pick up in a big way.
Yeah, I don't know, anything that can be said. I'm not afraid of corporate anything, like I buy organic broccoli, but I am aware there's corporate broccoli in a can, and I'm not going to fight to keep it illegal or worry about it. I mean, I think we all have access to cannabis, and that's the beauty of cannabis. I was a 13-year-old little boy growing it in my closet. I assure you, I feel like everybody can grow cannabis once there's no stigma or legal repercussions from doing so.
Todd, did you say broccoli in a can?
Yeah, I heard there's broccoli in cans for sure.
Again, does
it come with liver too? I mean,
I bet you there's broccoli and liver in a can. We could shop for some online for you. I can hook you up if you're in a liver mood. Although I'll pass on the body parts. But I think corporate cannabis is good, everybody. Let everybody have cannabis. Hopefully they buy cannabis instead of their fifth of whiskey, go home, don't beat their kids, fucking spend a little quality time, and sleep through the night. That's what I would hope, personally.
If you want to get the message out for people to not beat their kids, you need to go to Walmart on Saturday mornings with a megaphone and stand in the aisles and
give away free weed.
through it
Imagine if
at
Walmart
all the
had
women in there beating their kids.
Angry people.
Say what?
Blue light special on cannabis. Blue light special on cannabis.
Walmart shoppers might be a little heavier. No, actually, they'd all lose weight probably. Cannabis and Walmart would be a good thing.
I feel like some canned broccoli.
Dude, those people need canned cannabis at Walmart, bro. They need it.
I saw canned cannabis like 20 years ago, and it was in like
Lucky Mother's coffee shop.
Yeah, even before that, I saw it here in BC. I saw people that were doing it. They were shipping it this way and that way.
Oh, it was the year before you came to the Cup. It was 94. It was the first year I went. What's it? Lucky Mother's had the canned cannabis.
Yep.
Yeah. First I saw
it. Came with papers and the weed inside.
In the can, yeah. It was cool as could be.
Oh yeah, you got the canner, right? It's like, yeah, we got this canner. Let's can up a bunch of weed.
I've got a friend who's got a package from, I think, 1916 or 1914 that was the Indian natural cure for coughing and other illnesses. And then there was about 70 different illnesses listed on it. And it was simply a bag of bud.
Just simply a bag of bud.
Old, very old bud. But yeah, I mean, in 1914 or so, someone was packaging it and selling it as a natural cure derived from the local Indian tribes.
Hey, and I'm not going to say anything bad or anything, but you know what? Nitrogen, sealed cannabis in a can so light doesn't get in it would probably be a decent way to move it around. It wouldn't get crushed. You'd open it, it'd still smell fresh.
You'd have to have a hell of a can. It would have to be shaped like a cylinder.
You'd have to have a hell of a can. Hey, on that note, I want to welcome Marcel. I want to welcome Marcel to the room, who just showed up a little bit ago. Sometimes it takes me a while to welcome people into the room with the way conversation goes. So I'm just butting this in and saying, welcome, dude.
How's it going, guys? I was stoked to be here. Thanks for sharing the space with me.
Yeah, of course, dude. Looks like you're in some big industrial fucking outdoor building, like creating crazy shit.
You're the only guy I know that's actually trying to make a transparent monetary system.
Hey, do you guys want a quick tour of the shop? I can give you a virtual tour of the space we created.
Hell yes!
I'm not going to say no to a virtual tour.
All right. Well, so here we go. This is the. I've never done this with a laptop before, but
you got to be real. Like when you get it onto the thing you want to show, just stop moving it completely. Is that like the glory hole or what?
That's the glory hole. So that's Draco.
Damn, you put eyes on the glory hole?
Oh yeah, I mean you put the amount of effort I put into building that thing, and you're gonna want it to like have some niceness to it. In case people are wondering, This is the burner system.
Jesus.
This
That's
is
next
all.
level.
I started this project with a piece of notebook paper.
Yeah, wasn't this like, can you explain this to people? Because I remember this like you couldn't get shit hot enough, or what was it that, why did you create this thing?
Well, okay, so borosilicate glass melts about 1,000 degrees hotter than soft glass. And normally what people use this kind of equipment for is for working soft glass. So it's like old world style glasswork. And the with the boro, when you put it into a soft glass glory hole, even if you get it raging hot, it kind of barely softens. It doesn't really like cool up and become liquid the way you need it to effectively work glass. So maybe 12 years ago, as I was beginning my path as a glass worker, like I saw that as the way to improve basically the undiscovered country of the industry, was bringing the scientific glass into the art glass tool set. And you know, I went after it. I talked to the Corning engineers and all the engineers from the studio glass movement I could get a hold of. Pretty much everyone who built furnaces I could talk to, I talked to them, and you know, was working stuff out. It was a really, you know, the first one I built, I lit it up and it melted itself to death in like 70 or 80 hours. It was like less than 100 hours before this $5,000 package was worthless and I had to start over again.
Hey, Marcel?
Yeah?
If you quit moving around, you're making me seasick.
Sorry, guys. I'll set this thing down.
Dude, that's awesome. So you puddled the initial unit. You puddled it.
Yeah, I lined it with 3,000 degree insulated fire brick, and I turned it on, and the shit just started melting off the ceiling and sort of sloughing down the side, and then the top caved in. It happened over a course of like, you know, maybe 10, 15 work sessions. But by the last work session, the ceiling of the glory hole had like collapsed down into the middle of the work area, and the flame was actually hitting the backup insulation, and it was a mess. And those bricks were like $6, $7 each. So that was kind of the beginning of the process, was getting this glory hole going. And then, you know, the problem that came up right away was all of a sudden I could make these giant pieces of glass hot and do really huge stuff, but the market wants pipes, which are generally really small items. And so the best it was used for the first while was to do prep. And I'd make cane. I made cane for bracelets for my ex-wife. We did all this, you know, big, heavy work that you would normally do that would be hard with a torch, but with this glory hole, you can heat up a huge mass of glass, but what's hard about it is getting a hold of something small and doing delicate work. So over the last year or so, we started to use it for Marini, which is great because with Marini, you build your stuff big and then you stretch it down and it shrinks up, and that gives you the ability to have like delicate, like nice, tight work. So the glory hole's ability to heat a large mass is really coming into its own when it comes to making Marini and some of this other stuff that we're working on because of the large mass.
Well, that's cool that you still managed to find something to see. You're always, when you're ahead of your time, the shit you're doing is never like in congruence with everything else that's going around. It's completely usually against the grain of everything else that's going on. Like I need to produce cool, huge shit to practice this thing, but everyone wants tiny little things.
Right. Right. I mean, you have some of the things I made from that initial time. The, you got some of those, the exploded orb, and I think you have a normal goal too, somewhere around there.
Got my orb's right here. Got my orb.
I made these exploded pieces kind of out of a little bit of frustration with the, you know, I made a bunch of nice stuff that was as well formed as I could make it with my skill set, and you know, I thought the stuff was really special and awesome, and then so I started doing these crackle things and just going into more and more just of this exploded sort of like, this is intentional. This isn't like a flaw that happened that I then adapted. Like these, most of the broken orb pieces are created by intentionally opening up the crack. Or there was a piece I did where I actually finished the piece. I broke it off into gloves and dropped it right on the ground, and then picked it back up and finished it off all sharp to kind of get into this kind of like detail from the broken glass and get some more visually interesting shapes and interesting concepts to it.
I, on a side note, found a really beautiful little piece of hash in that cracked orb that I pulled down. So how fucking sweet is that?
All right.
I had no idea there was anything in it. I'm going to dab it. Why not? What are you looking at, D420K?
I'm looking at you.
Right on.
So I have a friend that just brought me some breakfast and hang out with me for a bit. I'm going to be sifting all day. I just wanted to jump on and say bong rip, mother lovers. Let's do one more before I sign out. And fuck, it's been fun listening to you guys all day. You guys are great.
Little terp dip on this piece of hash, I think. Some Black Lime Reserve, I think, is what we're going to be going with right now. Not sure if it's going to...
Marcus, are you going to Jamaica next week?
No, I was kind of supposed to go to Jamaica this week, and it just, you know, I wanted to go. I did, but I just didn't have enough business there, and I have business here, so I stayed here. I really wanted to, and I hope to be able to go in the near future. I always want to go to Jamaica, just for the record.
Well, next time it gets serious and you're going to go, be sure and I didn't make any plans because you didn't sound like you were making any. So
no, I would have let you all know had I made plans. It just I had an initial plan, and then it just sort of slowly fell apart. So
oh wow.
Hey, here's the other piece we've been working on, guys. This is the no DAPL protest coin progress so far. So we're this is a Lakota medicine wheel, and we're going to do a series of coins with this image as the center to benefit the water protectors.
Cool.
What are you going to do? Donate any funds that come from it to them?
Yeah, it's 100% donation on this one, so it's pretty much like everyone's putting in to make it happen.
Yeah, well, nice that you mentioned that, because I know there's a ton, not that you would ever be such a person, there are a ton of people scamming out money out of that whole thing right now, creating t-shirts and stickers and other things, and then of course selling it to keep the funds for themselves. So very good when you do something for the against that pipeline, that it's just 100%. Just donate it, whatever it is, give it to them, because you certainly don't want to be profiting even a penny off of that.
I saw a YouTube thing where the guy was asking one of the local Indian people how many different, what do you call it? Not a peace policy, but when they make an agreement with the Indians. Treaty. The guy asked him, how many treaties has the American government broken with you? And the guy looked at me and he said, how many have they made?
All of them.
Right.
Crazy shit.
No, I mean, that's really the core of this whole thing, is that they are, you know, people are saying that it's land owned by the oil companies, but it's only owned because they broke the treaty in 1859. So, you know, it's definitely like a sequential thievery of their lands that's continuing now, that we haven't actually stopped. You know, and I think that that's what the Lakota people are doing, is they're asking people to stand up and join together as the Rainbow Tribe and be the force that can stop this situation. You know, it's not the Native people by themselves who are going to do this. They are putting themselves out there to request our assistance as the rest of the tribes of the planet. Not just, you know, Team White Guy and, you know, like the whole scenario. But I think that here in the U.S., there's a lot of people that need to be aware of this, because I don't think I don't think the majority of people would stand for breaking these treaties. You know, that's not how the people I talk to on a day-to-day basis feel and act. And so getting these people back involved in the process, you know, and it's crazy that right now getting involved in the process means going to North Dakota and standing in front of fire hoses and getting frozen.
So fucked up. So fucked up. Look, if you could pump it through a pipe, put it in a goddamn tanker truck and drive it across the border, holy shit, problem solved, right?
Right.
What the fuck? They don't need a pipeline. Put it in a goddamn truck and drive it across the border. Done deal.
But if they poison the entire water supply, they make like $5 more.
Yeah.
And
So
they're
this
hugely into profits.
This is some of the dirtiest oil on the planet. This is the tar sands oil, which is being processed up in Canada, right? And so this is some of the most unenvironmentally friendly oil there is on the planet. It is just absolutely absurd that they think they need to put a fucking pipeline in there when they could drive tanker trucks over here till the clouds come home. It's so stupid. So
well, the water that they're using everywhere by getting the oil sands pipelines is really a sad story, because long ago, my attorneys approached them and said, hey, by the way, instead of using water to clean the oil out of the sand, here's this process here that'll do it highly efficiently, use zero water, and leave no footprint, and it's organic. And they weren't interested because they had a concession on as much water as they needed to use. So somebody sold out to them on that first, and they didn't have to look any further for any better process for doing it.
Yeah, they need water for volumetric displacement to get the oil up out of the ground. So it's an extremely intensive energy sucking process that actually uses more energy than it generates. It's not viable right now.
Yeah, that's a government project. None of those are viable.
Well, what's really crazy about the pipeline push that they're doing right now is it's a race to get the sequestered assets out of the ground. So they've identified asset after asset under the ground, but there's also these economic treaties that are limiting, because of greenhouse gases, how much of that oil will ever actually be extracted. And the deadlines start kicking in the early 2020s. So what they're trying to do with this pipeline is make it so that they can actually process, 10 times as much oil between now and 2020 as they would be able to with the tanker trucks. So then the other thing that the pipeline does is it causes investment from all these communities, which means they'll be invested in keeping the petrodollars flowing, which again is why we need to focus so hard on stopping this pipeline and every other pipeline, so that people look, when banks want to invest money into the energy industry, they need to be looking to alternative energy forms. And if we keep throwing up a stink like the DAPL, that will rapidly happen. Like, if they can keep oil from flowing in the DAPL by January 1st, a good number of the banks are going to pull out. We might actually kill that project as soon as January. And if the native peoples are able to grab the attention of all the peoples of the planet and bring them around this issue, here in the United States, we might be able to actually stop not just the DAPL, but overall government subsidized investment in the petro industry, which I would say is the goal.
Yeah, I think it's a dream, but sadly, the way they're handling it now and the way they have always handled such things point to the fact that they're going to use the tried and true method, which is fuck everybody. This is the way we're going to do it. And if you don't like it, tough shit. And that's just the way they handle things. And I'll point to anecdotal evidence of the last 300 years, 400 years. And I know that's not a very long period of time. You could go back to the earliest governments and find the same stuff. But why don't we change? Because there's not a consensus of the majority of the people. Instead, there's a few elite families running things on the world. And you can tell that that's the way it is, because no matter how we vote for things, our protest, our scream, or yell, or show up with petitions, they still do it the way they want to do it, no matter what. So that tells me that we're not really in any kind of a consensus thing here. We're just having our behavior moderated by the elite.
It does sometimes feel like we're hamsters just trying to get that one little drop out of the water bottle, you know, at a time. Like they just give us these little like, oh, okay, you can have licenses now. You can have these special permits to do what you should naturally be able to do. I'm with you. At the same time, we have gotten forward in my short lifetime. I've seen things move forward quite a bit. So on that note, I would like to welcome Dan Collins to the room. Because it's always nice to welcome the new guy, right? How are things?
It's nice to be here.
Excellent, dude. Well, welcome.
Good. Can you guys hear me?
Oh yeah. Yep.
I got you loud and clear.
Cool.
You're coming through.
Thanks for having me on. It's nice to be part of Hash Church. Cool.
Yeah, dude. Well, I mean, you and Marcel are working on a project that we want to share with the Hash Church audience. Of course, you worked on Degenerate Art with Slinger. Correct?
Yep.
Which was, I'm sure,
yes,
a very exciting project. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Sling's he's a really old friend of mine. So he came to me with this idea, and he knew I was a video editor. He knew I was doing documentaries. So he really came to me and said, "Can you tell this enormous story? You know, how do we turn this into something that will make sense?" So I got to spend a couple of years working on that, and you know, Project 33. This new documentary is it's a different kind of story, but you know, feeding on some of what you guys have been talking about today, and especially with this conversation about the pipeline. This film's not just about glass so much as it is about how, you know, small groups of people can create alternatives that can challenge the way that these more dominant systems are telling us that we have to live. So, you know, we might not be able to change, we might not be able to save the world with petitions, right? I mean, it's a very frustrating thing to try to face off against these very powerful forces. But I think, you know, what I've learned by visiting Marcel's shop and his sort of community that he's building there is that you can do things in little ways that can challenge those systems. And that comes down to, you know, cultivation of cannabis itself. Of course, organic agriculture where you're feeding yourself and your family. You know, Marcel's working on ideas about alternative currencies that will empower small businesses within the community. So there's a lot of things that I think people can do to sort of chip away at the system in little ways. So this film really kind of looks at that through the context of Marcel's various projects. So that's kind of what we've been working on.
Very cool. Well, it sounds like a deep project. I'm sure the rabbit hole will go deeper than even the two of you realize as you're starting.
Definitely. It already has.
It keeps going.
Yeah, well, it's great that that you've managed to manifest this sort of documentary and someone to be to take control of it for you, Marcel, because you're definitely a person that even when I met you many years ago, I thought, man, they gotta have like some cameras following this fucking guy around and like getting into his brain. He thinks differently than other people. I appreciate that myself. It's one of the reasons I've always been happy to call you my friend. You think differently than other people. You know, where most people come up to a roadblock and they're like, oh yeah, you can't really, you know, go any further. Marcel's looking up and he's thinking, I think I could go over it, or around it, or through it, or under it. He's definitely not thinking the same way everyone else that stopped at the wall. And they're like, well, we're going to have to turn around now. I mean, there's a wall right there. What are you going to do, you know? And even if he didn't have the tools to get through the wall, then he starts like inventing the tools that will allow him to get through the wall, which he did with his glass blowing, like creating prosthetics that allow him to, you know, further that process, that creative process. So I'm sure taking it outside of the box of glass blowing and into this, you know, concept of, I know that documentaries are powerful. And when I watch a really good one, regardless of, you know, what the powers of be want to have happen, it can change the way I think. I mean, D420K, who's not in here right now, but he watched the documentary recently called Food Choices, and it blew him away. Like, you know, it finally was that, you know, and I've known this information for 20 plus years myself, close to 30. But for him, it just happened, you know, last week or 2 weeks ago. And it's been super inspiring to him watching this documentary, changing his diet, being excited about creating food, and you can see how that simple documentary is creating change regardless of what the powers that be want, you know, to have happened. The change is still occurring in the people one by one.
Yeah, I mean, the battle is fought one-minded.
Awkward silence.
Hey, can I just take this moment to be like, we just launched our Kickstarter, and if every one of you guys could just take the time to go take a look at it, and just, you know, it's got a lot of our videos, the trailer for the movie. It's pretty awesome. I'm super proud of it. Dan's worked his butt off on it, and 100% of the Kickstarter goes straight to Dan to capture this story. This isn't supporting my studio or my artwork. This is supporting Dan to capture the story 100%.
And what is the Kickstarter?
It's Project 33. The link is really long, but if you went to Kickstarter and just type Project 33, it'll pop right up. And also on Marcel's Instagram, which is Marcel Glass, and my Instagram is Dan Collins Media. We've been posting a lot of little promos for the Kickstarter, and we're releasing video clips a little bit at a time just to get people excited. But there's a lot of good footage out already. And you know, we do talk about how this film is going beyond glass, but don't get me wrong, there is some sick glass work. If you've ever been to Marcel's shop, you know what goes on there. It's mind-blowing. So, you know, and I'm shooting this stuff in such a way that it's really exciting to me. So I think people are really going to dig it when they see what's actually happening. So yeah, you can go on Kickstarter and look at Project 33, and following us on Instagram is just a good way to keep up with what's going on. We're trying to nail this funding in the next 3 weeks, and that way we want to finish the film in the spring, and we want to debut it in June. Like, wow. Sometimes it takes me 4 or 5 years to make a film. We want to get this out in the summer, like around DFO time, hopefully. And then we'll do premieres in various cities that we think, you know, there's a good audience and that make a lot of sense. Portland, Seattle, Philly. You know, I'm in Philly on the East Coast. There's a huge glass community here. But we want to get this out as soon as possible because we really do think it can change some minds, you know, and inspire people to think about, you know, Marcel said once to me, you know, an alternative is possible. An alternative is possible. We can think outside the box, right? And so that, to me, that's like the motto of the film, is that alternatives are possible. We just kind of have to have the nerve to find them. And I mean, one thing I love about this community, the cannabis community and the glass community, is that you guys you've like defined what it means to seek and achieve alternatives. You know, I mean, I've been a part of the legalization movement since the 90s, and I've been around the glass game that long as well. And as a community, you guys know how to break rules, you know what I mean? And you know how to push boundaries. And so that's the coolest part about this project. And you know, it's an honor for me to be able to work on a project like this, because it inspires the hell out of me, that I get to see like that we actually can make a difference on a micro level, that if enough people do that, you can really make a big splash on a macro level. And it's an alternative for me. I mean, I get to make a living, more or less, you know, telling these stories. So I'm just really stoked to be a part of it. I can't wait for everybody to see it. I think it's going to be big.
Yeah, well, dude, I'm definitely excited myself to. I just love the idea that we're talking about it right now. It doesn't exist yet, and in like 6 to 8 months or whatever, June, you're gonna have it potentially premiering around the country. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we just, you know, we got to come strong on the Kickstarter so that we can not only get the footage that we already have edited, but also get some of these awesome collaborative efforts that are going to happen in the next 6 months on film, so they can be in the movie, and get Dan a budget so he can travel around and get these interviews where he needs to get them to really like tell that story strongly.
Right. Well, yeah, like I said, if there's anything I can do to help other than what we're doing right now, if you guys ever need old historical footage from like degenerate art and regenerate art shows or anything like that, just let me know. It's yours for the use to do as you please.
Cool.
Always good to offer any help that you can for projects like this. I mean, the Kickstarter is good, a donation is good, but hey, I have some historical video and photography as well, because I've also been friends with these guys since the 90s, luckily enough, and been involved in the glass scene, and been involved with Slinger throwing the original Degenerate art show at my gallery in I guess 2004, maybe, I think. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even remember the year, but I remember you were there, Marcel, and you showed up with that big giant phoenix coming out of the flames, and it was like, what the hell? This guy's got it was like a 4.5 foot statue of a giant glass phoenix coming up out of sand, and he had like a bowl and a pipe, and it was all just like, it was just like Marcel, it was outside of the box. His shit didn't fit in the glass aquarium boxes that we made for every other blower. And even Max, who blew this giant, crazy 22-pound piece, it fit in the box. Everyone's piece fit in the box except Marcel's. Marcel's piece did not fit in the box. So go figure, eh? There's a metaphor in that.
Yes.
Build a bigger box.
Literally outside the box.
Yeah, completely, dude. And it was also the main piece at the Degenerate Art Show that when the police came in to be like, what the fuck is going on here, in full, police uniform, guns and everything, we all stood next to the Phoenix and had this wonderful conversation with them, and sort of it was like hypnotic to them. They were just like, wow, this is incredible. Like, wow, I never knew that you could do, they were literally blown away while we were just smoking copious amounts of hashish in the basement. Like you said, pushing those boundaries just as far as we possibly could. So I think it's important never to, for me, I've always been most sort of proud, I guess, of the glass blowers who have acknowledged the cannabis link to glass blowing, to the people who buy the product, to, back in the day, I thought it was very, very, very much linked to the cost of cannabis, like the value of the glass art. People were like, if you didn't sell cannabis, it was like you just spent $1,200 on a pipe, like in 1990, whatever. That was a lot of money. That was like, holy shit, that's a lot of money. But generally, if you were flipping pounds, that was nothing to take a little bit of that money and be like, I'm supporting my bro. That's a wicked piece. Like, it was just a neat industry that we created, based on our own community. And now it's kind of sounds like that same thing that we created in this, the combination of these two communities now is getting taken outside of that box, Marcel style, and passed on to the rest of the world, hopefully. Because it's a good relationship.
Yeah.
Well, right on.
We've come such a long way, too. I mean, attitudes about cannabis and about glass have changed so much. Huge. I was just telling this anecdote. I bought my dad Matty White made this little set of glass pieces that were like fishing lures, right? I don't know if you guys have seen them. They're really cool. My dad taught me to fish when I was a kid, so I got him one of the bobbers. And my dad has never smoked weed in his life, you know what I'm saying? And would have freaked out about the idea of owning a glass piece until he saw Degenerate Art. And you know what I mean? Even when I was making that movie with Slinger, I didn't even really tell my parents really what I was doing exactly, because they're super anti-drug and they don't understand they just don't get it, right? They saw Degenerate Art and they understood glass. So I went home for Thanksgiving and I hand him this bobber. I'm like, my buddy Matty White made this. Oh, by the way, it's a fucking pipe. You know what I mean? And he wasn't freaked out by it. He'll never smoke out of it, but it didn't bug him that it was a pipe, because he understood, because of that film, how even his mind had changed. So I don't know. It's just it was an interesting moment for me to be.
Never say never.
White pipe.
Never say never.
Turn it into a Christmas tree ornament if you want, but whatever.
Dude, it could be 10 years from now.
Maybe he'll wake up one day and.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'll tell you. I've known many people who never in a million years would I have guessed that they would use cannabis. And they get older, they start having health ramifications. They realize how helpful it is, how much better it makes them feel, how it gives them a positive mindset. And suddenly they're using it. It's happening a lot out there, especially now with older people who realize that cannabis is a preventative medicine. You can take it not to get high, but to actually prevent, disease in your body, to keep your endocannabinoid system running at top speed.
My dad got bone cancer and was laying in the hospital, and my mom got in touch with me, and I went to see him, and he weighed 126 pounds, and he refused to eat the hospital food. I think hospital food is actually worse than prison food. But anyway, he refused to eat that, and he didn't really have any appetite. And so I asked him if he would eat just one thing a day for me in the morning. And he said, yeah, he'd try that. So I started bringing him a brownie that I made the night before every morning. And he would sit and nibble on it the first day. And after he had eaten the whole thing, he was sitting there and he kept looking over at me. And I said, what's up? And he said, you feel like going over and getting me some wings at, the place where the girls wear the, what do you call it? The very tight outfits. Hooters. He said, you mind going over to Hooters and get a couple dozen wings for me? And I said, no, not at all, Dad. So I went and got him and he ate them. And anyway, long story short, after staying 2 months by his bedside in the hospital while he had cancer, he put 52 pounds back on, eating a brownie every morning.
Yeah, that's huge. Definitely stimulates appetite, no doubt about it. I'm sure you were probably surprised that he was acknowledging cannabis use at the end of his life.
No, he actually, near the end, a few days before the end, he already came to be peaceful with it. But he told me, he says, by the way, he says, I know what's in those brownies. And I said, yeah, what, Dad? And he said, you're putting hash in there. And I said, well, when did you try hash before? And he said, in North Africa, when they ran out of booze, the Muslims supplied them with hashish. And so that's what they were smoking as a way of getting high. And he did say Muslims. So I don't know what to tell you about that. I don't have any feelings about it one way or the other. To me, all the religions who follow a book where somebody said something about somebody are fairy tales that have been perpetuated endlessly by people who are endlessly involved in a control drama called religion that unfortunately.
Another great documentary.
Yeah, another time.
Another time. That's awesome. Well, cool, man. Well, so right on. So people can go check out the Kickstarter. They can check it out on your Facebook pages and your Instagram pages and support what you guys are doing. How much money are you guys trying to raise for the project?
Our full budget is $65,000, but on this Kickstarter, we're just going for 15. Which is kind of a humble goal. We just wanted to make sure that first and foremost, I can get out to Eugene a handful more times, document what I have to do at Marcel's over the next few months. And also I really want to travel around to get interviews from guys who aren't necessarily in Eugene when I'm there. There's a bunch, I'm not going to name names right now, but they're all people you guys know. And I just want to be able to go where they are and interview them if possible too. So we're looking for 15,000. We've raised 4,000 and change in like our first 5 days, which is amazing. Marble Slinger and JD Mapleson came on as $1,000 donors, like right out of the box as associate producers, which is awesome. Those guys were just like, here you go, man. Like we're behind this. And we got a lot of people pitching in, like for $100 you get, Marcel's creating a whole new coin for this project, like just for the supporters. So in a couple of weeks, we hope to document like the creation of that coin so we can show everybody that if you pitch in, like you're going to get this exclusive coin that nobody else is going to get, you know? So we're trying to come up with ideas, you know, but we figure 15,000 isn't too high to hit. So we got 3 more weeks to do it to raise another 11. So we're just hoping everybody sees the video and goes, oh my God, I want to be a part of this, you know?
I predict you're going to get 5 times as much as that on your first try. That's my prediction.
I hope so, man.
Our hope. We really would like to see that 65 come in. I got to tell you guys, like that's what really makes this thing fly, is that stretch goal, getting all the way there to where Dan is like ready to be at work for the next 9 months. You know, like that's what we need to happen. And as soon as he's like full time, just like cracking that shit out, like that's when things are going to really start. And, you know, and the reason we want to release so soon is so that next summer, when the film is premiering, we can be actually doing events where we're promoting our transparent currency system as the movie is dropping. So it really is it's a 1-2 punch sort of a situation where we don't want to drop the movie and then wait and then come out and start to actually do this stuff. We're already doing this stuff. The documentary is just documenting what we're already doing. And so next summer, having that documentary drop, giving that super awesome educational prop for people to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, I mean, it's going to be amazing.
Hey, Marcel, am I the first one to comment on a transparent monetary system?
Yeah, I think you just coined that. You just coined that phrase, and I love it.
Well, feel free to use it, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. I will be using that transparent monetary system because I mean, really, like that's what I'm going for more than anything else is that sense of transparency and that sense of, okay, I'm using art units, and I know that by using these art units, you can't stop the harm that happens in the world because of these systems that they've put in, but you can use an art unit and be like, I know that because I'm using this art unit, I'm putting a good ripple out into the world. Like when somebody buys an art unit, they're taking petrodollars and they're putting those petrodollars into our community to work towards a transparent monetary system. So that those dollars go to work for us, and they still have the value to spend with that art unit through any of the people who have agreed to accept the art unit. So
I suggest you use that as the name for the movie, a transparent monetary system.
I really like that. Marcel has called it a lot of different things, and I still haven't really come up with a title for the full title for the movie. Usually it kind of comes in a dream or something, you know, so that might end up in there, man. I'll have to make sure you get full credit for that. But it is transparent, man. It also glows. It's a UV reactive currency, man. Yeah, I really like these things. I don't know if you guys have seen all these different coins that he's done, but it's amazing to watch them being made. I mean, if you're most of you are probably familiar with like hot shop work and what it looks like, but for somebody like me who's been around glass for a long time, but who's never blown glass myself, you know, and I've seen a lot of footage of Marcel's work and stuff, you know, I saw a lot of footage obviously for Degenerate Art, but when I got in that studio and watched this shit going down, it blew my mind. I mean, I had to keep reminding myself that I was the guy with the camera because I'd be like putting it down going like, what the, like, how did, you know, it really is amazing. So, I mean, that's the other thing too, for like Degenerate Art fans, you know, who might think, I don't understand this currency thing, or like, this is a little confusing to me. Like, that's fair because this is a complex idea. And I think if it wasn't confusing, it would be an indication that maybe it's not a deep enough challenge. You know, to me, I feel like that's actually, it speaks to the complexity of the idea behind the currency, that it is confusing. But if you're just a glass junkie and you watch this movie, you're going to be fucking blown away just by the glass angle. I mean, it is sick work, and there's dozens of artists who've come through that shop. I mean, when you see like, you know, Raj Singh and Kai Beck and like all these different people like working on stuff at the same time, and Chaka's there like making ice cubes, and they're putting collabs together on the spot, like while they're waiting to do the hot shop work later. And you know, Conrad's there, and Maddie White and Jess Boggs is, you know, making elements. It's fucking amazing to watch. So I just think it's going to end up being a really entertaining film. And you know, like if we drop this thing in June and people start interacting with Marcel's project more, you know, our idea has always been like, well, shit, we'll just start shooting a sequel like immediately, like the next year of rollout. You know, what's it going to look like? You know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm really excited about it. It's just a great opportunity to get to be involved in this. And again, man, I can't thank Slinger enough for being my boy from way back in the day anyway, but like for introducing me to this world. I mean, and introducing me to Marcel, you know, and all these people that I met through that project. That's why, you know, I'm able to do this. So I'm grateful, you know, extremely grateful to him and to everyone. I mean, I went to Michigan Glass Project this summer. I'd never been to a glass event of that scale. That was the first event of that scale. And man, like I've never met like the vibe in that place was so positive. It was just unbelievable to me. You know what I mean? You guys have such a great community, And I'm sure there's like this and that, you know, there's beefs here and there or whatever, like any other human beings will have. But the culture of positivity in both the glass and cannabis communities overall is something that I feel like I am a part of too and want to be a part of, you know. So to me, this is like a dream job to be able to do this. So if we can raise a little more money, I get to keep my dream job and I don't have to go try to work at some fucking corporate place, you know. So it's pretty awesome.
Totally. Yeah, I got to give shout out to Slinger as well. He introduced Marcel and I as well.
Slinger has introduced me to some really awesome people as well. Like I'm totally like, I mean, you know, Sling brought me Chris Carlson, who ended up working in my shop for like 2 or 3 years and was just an awesome shopmate, and really productive to work with. And, you know, so like, that's something about Slinger. He just goes out there and he makes those connections and he sees the big picture and he like makes things happen, you know, in front of the camera and behind the scenes.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. Well, sweet, sweet, sweet. I'll tell you, it's a beautiful day here in British Columbia. Blue skies. All of the mountains across the way are literally just white. Like it dumped last night. And they're glowing in the sun like the most beautiful. For those of you that love the snow, you understand there's something hypnotic about it. It's almost like what I love about music and what I love about cannabis and what I love about scuba diving, that same subtle energy is present when I look at these bold, beautiful, majestic mountains covered in snow and thinking, I could take my sled up there and my snowboard and really have some fun. Gotta love interacting with the British Columbia wilderness. So good.
That'd be fun, man.
Come up and do it sometime, dude. You don't even know how much fun is. It's the most ridiculous amount of fun ever. Like, and because it's a life and death situation, it's a different vibe. You know, you really get a different closeness with people when you go out into the backcountry and you spend time in a place where if something bad happens, you have to save their life and they have to save your life. It creates a little bit of a stronger bond than just shooting the shit over a game of pool, let's just say.
The government took a bunch of us there. It was called Vietnam.
That's what I'm saying. And do soldiers not bond? Exactly.
When we came back from Vietnam, a bunch of us stuck together as friends, and we all had the same feeling. One day you were in Vietnam. You know, I went there on a prop job. It took 5 days to fly there. But they brought us back on a jet. That was the first jet I'd ever been on. And one day you had a rifle and you had your kit and you had your survival stuff. And the next day you were on the street. And it was a very strange sensation because there was no backup. You didn't have your weapon. It was a strange time.
That must have been terribly disconcerting. I had a veteran friend who worked here on the farm. Well, Woody, he's been on the show before, and it was definitely like getting to know him better and seeing him encountering some of that insecurity from all of a sudden being cut off from his team. Because that's kind of how it seemed like it was for him, where he had like he was used to going everywhere with the team. He had 5 guys in tactical gear. One of them had a radio, and anything happened, they could use all of those tools and like get through like ridiculously crazy situations. And it's really interesting to like see the struggle of trying to assimilate, you know, trying to like get a civilian network to give you that same kind of power. You know, and we all have that, I believe, or a lot of us do. Like to me, that's what this Hash Church thing is about, is we're giving each other power by having each other's back. And, you know, I think that when you go ahead.
No, Hash Church is acting like our radio between each other, you know. But in Vietnam, you have to remember radio communications weren't that great. Mostly what you got over the radio was you could talk to somebody else who could commiserate with you while you were having the shit shot out of the zone where you were at. And it wasn't high tech like it is nowadays, where now the Marines call in whatever. I mean, you could call in a helicopter in those days, but you had to be somebody. It had to be the right place. It had to be available, and none of these things were really happening all the time. So a lot of the times you face situations and you just faced it for what it was and did your best. You could fight your way out of it. You could get yourself to the point where you could at least leave the area semi-safely, and that's what you would have to do. And that's what we were faced with in those days. And when you came back to the States, nobody here really shouldered any responsibility for it. They would ask you stupid questions like, did you ever kill any women and children? And these not the kind of things somebody who just came back from a war zone needs to hear. Because you do end up killing women and children occasionally in a war zone. And it's not because you want to. It's not because you were hunting them down and taking shots at them, but sometimes collateral damage happens, depends on what you're doing, and you have to be part of it whether you like it or not. And it's just, it's one of the 10,000 flaws of war.
Yeah, it's a pretty big one for sure.
That is a implication of judgment, which I can't imagine. That would have been hard to do.
For sure. Well, I don't know, guys. It's been a 3.5 hour, pretty solid hash church today. My kid's been banging away at the door for the last like 15 minutes trying to get my attention. He's got some pretty cool new clothes on I haven't seen before, so I'm anxious to get to the little guy and go hang out and have some fun today. But I want to thank Dan and Marcel for coming in and giving us the update on the Project 33 fundraiser and where you guys can go check that out if you want to be a supportive part in having it come to be created. Also, of course, thanking Anndrea and Skunkman Sam for coming and sharing the good stories. And Anndrea, Hermann, and Clint Palmer, that was wonderful to have a 2 hour plus hemp discussion this morning. I really have a feeling I'm going to go back and listen to some of that. Mark Scaldone, always a pleasure. Etienne and Todd McCormick, thank you guys. Dr. Natasha Rise, bringing in so many wonderful guests. It was her that invited Anndrea. So thank you, everyone, for coming in and being a part of the panel. And, of course, all the people who watch every week, we thank you. We will see you next week for Hash Church 116. And I think in 3 weeks, Hash Church lands on Christmas Day. So I got to figure that out. Not sure what I'm doing here, but I might be just in Hash Church by myself while all my friends are still, or I'll just, you know what I'll do? It'll be Jewish Hash Church with all my Jewish friends. And that's what's going to have to happen. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Peace out, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, Marcel, thank you. I'm glad I could bring something to your project.
Thank you, Anndrea. That term is really awesome. The transparent monetary system. Because, I mean, shit, that's what's needed.
It is.
Definitely.